Thinking Tackle Podcast.
Joining me today in the studio is John Baker. Now, when it comes to bait, John is one of the most knowledgeable and respected people around. Since the early 70s, his baits have literally caught thousands of specimen-sized fish. Now, naturally, John is a hugely experienced angler and has had the pleasure of fishing some of the country's most prestigious venues, including Redmire Pool, Savay and Ashley Pool. His angling's also taken him around the world, where as well as catching carp to over 70 pounds, he's also caught, amongst other species, monster tarpon to over 120 pounds. Now, during this show, John shares with us some fantastic information and some brilliant stories from what many people would regard as the golden era of carp fishing. Hope you enjoy the show. John Baker, we are live. Welcome to the podcast. Great to have you on the show.
Well, thank you very much for asking me, and it's a privilege to be asked.
John, it's been a long time coming, mate. Everybody's been asking for you, honestly.
And John's been messed around a little bit as well, hasn't he? So,
well, you're flattering me a bit here. It's lovely to be here, and I've already bumped into to Danny and Damon and Tom.
Yeah.
And it's great to see all the pictures up on the wall of some old pals of mine. Brilliant, absolutely lovely.
It's unusual, actually. We were saying that Dan's in and out of the office. We don't necessarily see him all the time, so it's nice to come in and say hi to him, isn't it?
Yeah, it was great. He's looking very well, and there's a certain atmosphere here which it's like going into a giant swim, because every room you go in, there's a bit of fishing tackle.
There's a fishing conversation.
There's a fishing conversation going on, and you hear all these snippets. It's great. Yeah.
It's not. To be fair, it's quite often actually I walk past an office and somebody's spooling up out of a bucket or something. That's just standard practice here, John.
It's great.
And when his dad goes missing as well, it's like, well, where's Damo? He's probably down in the warehouse getting his kit ready for his latest session. Yeah, it's nice.
It is.
It's nice. At the start of the show, John, before we do anything else, we always ask for a nice gift. Have you got anything nice for us?
Well, my gift, I guess, you've got a table full of fantastically interesting things here. I can see some pharyngeal teeth and a frog and weird stuff. Mine is a little bit different. It's very much part of me. I've written a little poem for you.
Brilliant.
That's a podcast first, isn't it?
It's great.
And we'll get straight on with it. I'll put my glasses on and I'll read it to you. So this is really partly linked to how busy I've been over the last year, largely motivated by lovely people that have contacted me and asked me, to help them with their bait, which is always a great motivator. But also my son, William, who's really, put some energy into the business and persuaded me to do some YouTube clips, which I've thoroughly enjoyed doing. And so this little poem I wrote really just as a result of what's happened recently, but also it's been true for the last 30 or 40 years. The poem is called Do Me a Flavour.
I like that original.
Fire away then, John.
Fire away.
Come on, John, straight down the barrel. Your camera's over here.
Straight down the barrel.
Absolutely.
Do me a flavour. Have you heard the latest rumours going round on social media with people doing research on Google and Wikipedia? I'm getting lots of emails and being asked all sorts of favours. But we know the real reason is they want to use my flavours. Most anglers want a quick result without understanding why. One day I'll tell my story because there is no need to lie.
Yes.
Well done.
And
I love it.
The last line of that poem comes from a very famous book written by Richard Walker. And Richard Walker wrote the book with the last line of the angler's prayer in it, no need to lie. And for those of you who don't know the angler's prayer, it's very quick, and I'll tell you because it's true for all of us. And the angler's prayer goes like this: I pray that God will send me a fish so big that even I, when talking of it afterwards, may have no need to lie.
There you go. It's out there for everyone now.
So it's out there for everyone.
I feel like I should know the angler's prayer, but I don't, John. What do you know many people that know this? Am I in the minority here?
Well, no, you're probably not in a minority.
Thank you very much for that, by the way.
It's a pleasure. I don't know about the history of the poem. I don't know who wrote it. It's probably one of those you could find it in some dusty volume somewhere, and it's probably got Anon written after it. But my grandmother gave me that poem on a little wooden plaque, which hangs in my study. And bless her heart, she's written in her little spidery writing on the back, to dear John, happy Christmas. I hope you will always have a good catch. And I've had that for best part of 60 years. A sweet little poem from my grandmother.
Yeah, that is. Yeah. And do you think it's helped you?
Well, yes. I think when somebody you love gives you something with love, it doesn't matter what it is, really, does it? Whether it's a nice card, something where some thought has been put into it, or even just some kind words. In fact, talking about kind words, and we go off on a tangent almost immediately. I was listening to a radio program the other day, and it was a wonderful guy who was a Hindu holy man, and he was saying that one of the most important things, the sort of mantras and the beliefs of Hindu people, is to always be kind to people, and always do something, that demonstrates kindness and thought, and it costs nothing to be kind. So, to answer your question, I think of my grandmother, because whose grandmother isn't lovely?
Yeah, exactly.
They've got all the experience of life, and they have nothing to give but love. So quite an emotional thing to say. But I'm not that emotional about my grandmother to that extent. But
love and wisdom.
Love and wisdom. Yes.
Yeah. All right, John. We got quite a few props here. We've got. I mean, anyone that's listening to this, John is a super organised guy, right? And we want to cover all sorts on this show, don't we? And so we got lots of props and different bits and pieces here. You wanted to start by talking about sweeteners.
I did, yes. I will, in actual fact.
Okay.
I get asked every type of question you can possibly think of about bait advice, and a lot of the answers that lie come from human food, and also come from additives that have been used in fish bait, for many years. We still use some of the things in modern baits that they've been using for centuries. And I've brought a couple of examples of this in, which are linked to sweeteners, and that's honey. So I'll talk a little bit more about the honey that I've brought in a minute, but we'll speak specifically to answer your question, Simon, about sweeteners in bait. One of the reasons why we have come to start using sweeteners in bait over the last 40 years is since we started using flavours, food flavours, which often have a bitter taste. And they have a bitter taste because they are invariably on a solvent or carrier which has a slightly nasty taste. But they are designed to be used at very low levels. The type of flavour that's typically sold in the angling market, on average, so average flavours, can contain, shall we say, relatively low strength quality flavours made with low cost ingredients for obvious reasons. There's profit in it for the flavour companies, not the bait companies. I'm talking about, they've obviously got profit to make, but I'm talking about the flavour companies that make it. And when they hear from an interested bait company, oh, can you supply me with some flavours? I think their eyes light up because they realise they can get away with selling for a good price a flavour which is relatively low quality. So what happens is we historically have tended to put rather high doses of relatively average quality flavour into our bait ingredients. So this is during a manufacturing process if you're a boilie manufacturer, and at home if you're a DIY bait maker. And therefore, you put a lot of flavour in your bait and it has a funny taste. So you want to counteract that taste, because we tend to, as human beings, we like good tasting foodstuffs, and we then extend that requirement through to our bait. So we want it to taste nice. So we put sweetener in. And for years there's been various sweeteners used. Saccharin based. It could be talin based, which is thalmatin. And there's all sorts of fructose, there's dextrose, there's maltose, hundreds of different sweeteners. But you don't need those, because there's something which is massively more complex than any sweetener you can buy from any company. And I'm not pointing any fingers at any individual company, because it wouldn't be fair to do that, and it would be very unprofessional to do so. But I even sell a sweetener, liquid creamy sweetener, and I only do so because people ask me for it. But I don't use it. I use honey, and so complex is honey. It's been used in bait since, Isaac Walton wrote about it in the 1660s, using honey in making up little pellets, almost like the first boilie, and he dried them in front of the fire and used clarified honey. So now we have access to some very exotic honeys. For example, I brought in some Manuka honey, which is from the Manuka bushes in Australia, Tasmania, those places.
What are the difference between these honeys then, John?
Well, this one's an orange blossom honey. When the bees collect the honey, their honey takes on all the aroma chemicals that are present in the nectar and everything, and the pollen that they're gathering, and they bring that back to the hive. So you can literally, my father kept bees, and you can literally taste the different flavours depending where he put the hives, and he had permission to put his hives in different places, and the honey would taste differently after we'd extracted it from one that was placed in one area to one that was placed on another. So that is massively complex, so complex it would be almost impossible to analyse it unless you had a chemical laboratory. So not only is the taste fantastic, but honey's very heat resistant as well. So it's a fantastic cooking aid, and it's used by top chefs. So Greek honey is good. These two I've brought in are my particular favourites, orange blossom and Manuka. But if you go to any specialist honey supply shop or local health food shop or even your supermarket, you can find a sweetener that will set you up for life in any of your baits if you just want to put a sweetener in.
You're applying this to the base mix. So how do you apply honey?
With the eggs. So it goes in with at the time that when you're making up your bait, you've got eggs cracked, ready to add the flavour. So you add the honey at the same time that you add the flavours and any other additives you're putting in the bait at that time. So honey would be perfect for putting into, what we call confectionery flavours. So sweet, creamy, fruity. Can't really see any point at all.
No, I know where you're going to go with this.
Yeah. Simon, can you see any point in putting honey in a fish meal? No.
Unusual taste.
Well, if sweeteners were so good as fish attractors, I'm talking about synthetic sweeteners and enhancers, they would put them in commercial fish pellets. They don't. The opposite is the case. They let the ingredients, all the combined ingredients that are used in the pellets, do its work. Vitamins and minerals are far more important than taste enhancers.
Yeah, I've heard you talk about this before.
Yeah.
How much? Say a 6-egg mix. How much of that would you add to your?
Third of a teaspoon.
Right. So not a vast amount of it. That's enough to give the bait the extra enhancement that it kind of needs.
Well, the analogy I would give is, if, for example, you buy yourself a nice punnet of strawberries, they taste much better if you just sprinkle them with sugar, don't they?
They do, Tobe, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
Always.
To be fair.
Yeah.
Strawberries and ice cream, fantastic.
Yeah.
But, so sweeteners, sugar, but in particular natural sweeteners and honey in particular, it is an enhancer in its own right. And whilst we're on the subject of enhancers, you often see the descriptions of from various bait manufacturers and bait suppliers, of which there are thousands now, and they say, oh, our bait contains enhancers. Well, you don't need enhancers.
Just the right ingredients.
Just the right ingredients. The ingredients themselves are an enhancer. And in actual fact, 100% of all enhancers, inverted commas, that are sold for aquaculture, bait, animal feed, etc., are actually powdered flavours with a sweetener. That's what an enhancer is.
Yeah. I don't know if I mentioned this to you previously or not, but sweet Kajalza, the NutriBaits, that was a sweetener. Brian Scholes said to me recently that he accidentally put, I think he put a massive dosage of sweet Kajalza with his mixers, fired the mixers out on the surface. The response was instant. The fish were straight on them. But when he went back the next day, no response. If anything, the fish actually completely backed off. How long can you get away with like over enhancing a bait with a sweetener for before they just don't want to go near it?
Well, I've never carried out that experiment, but I understand what possibly happened. There was an initial reaction from something that these fish had probably never seen before, and so they went for it. And it clearly overloaded their senses, much like we would go out for a particularly strong curry, and then we taste it for the whole of the next day.
Yeah,
that's a very good way of putting it.
Yeah.
And it also repeats on us, and etc. So the same thing happens with flavours. In fact, when we first started using flavours and sweeteners in bait, you would use very basic base mix, like a 50-50 mix, semolina, soy flour, that sort of thing. And you'd ring the changes with flavours. Those days the popular flavours were from people like Jeff Kemp, and you'd buy 4 or 5 or 6 of his flavours and just rotate them. And I looked at my old recipe books, and some of the flavours, goodness me, we were putting in 15 and 20 mil into a 4-egg mix.
Did you say that one of your customers was using what was it, like 6 mil of sweet, a massive high dosage of sweetener with their plum mix?
Yes.
And they were encountering a few. They were getting bites, but the bites were tailing off as well.
And also, a lot of the fish were being hooked and lost because they were being.
That's interesting what you were saying there. Yeah.
Because I've had this long belief. Well, it's fairly obvious, really. That sounds a little bit patronising. I don't mean it to, but if you're using a bait which is interesting, attractive, but maybe a bit strong, and you've got a hair rig attached to it, so it's modern hair rigs are really just anti-eject rigs. The fish will take it into their mouth, and they're more sensitive mouth parts with all the taste receptors in the pocket in the roof of their mouth will pick up in a sort of secondary sensory reaction, and they blow the bait out because they don't want to chew it, they don't want to pass it down into their elementary tract, so they reject it. And so the fish are being hooked with over-flavoured baits on rejection. You're still getting bites and you're catching fish in spite of the bait recipe, not because of it. And this is
you've noticed that as well with losing more fish, you said as well, didn't you?
Yeah, losing fish because you're not getting good hook holds.
Yeah, and you've noticed a trend with that, with what going crazy with the with the dosages, or just a subtle increase in volume.
Bit of both, I think, Simon. Really, people are contacting me, and over the years, we've discussed it on the bank. When you're sitting, I've just lost a fish, and I've just lost a fish. We've all been there, and often it's not down to the rig. Look, if you're roach fishing and you're catching 50 roach in a morning session, you're going to lose a few. And it's the same with carp fishing. The more fish you catch, the more you're going to lose. And often, it's got nothing to do with the bait. It's just bad luck. But or perhaps you're playing the fish too hard. It could be 101 reasons. But I do think that if you can sit back quietly, take 5 and think about your hook baits in particular, and getting that profile in harmony with the base mix, getting the flavour and sweeteners, anything you're using in that bait in harmony, then the fish are more likely to positively accept it, which is going to equal a better hook hold.
Stay in the mouth for longer.
Yeah.
They're going to start to treat it as a proper food source rather than out of curiosity.
I think so.
Yeah. That makes sense. You've said before about, so you don't like going over the top on hook bait attractors either.
No.
I mean, that's a common trend with people, isn't it? It's soaking baits and all that sort of stuff. Not something that you're particularly fan of.
Well, listen, it all works. Everything works, doesn't it? If people often have their last year's bait in the freezer, which is obviously gone a bit stale, but they've paid good money for it. They don't want to waste it, so they bring it out in the springtime, and it's got freezer burn and it's a bit dehydrated, because all freezing will dehydrate to a certain extent, a boilie. So they bring it out, they dry it out, wait for the moisture to come off, wait for the boilie to absorb whatever moisture is inside the plastic bag that it's been frozen in, and then they'll glug it in all sorts of interesting liquids and to effectively rehydrate it. So what you've got is this massive overload of old boilies, which will be slightly denatured because they've been frozen for ages, and then they'll chuck them in the lake. And this is hugely attractive to a hungry fish. Obviously they'll eat those baits, but the actual signal that's coming through the water column on using glugs isn't controllable, to me. You're less likely to get a quick bite fishing over a bed of very, very over-flavoured baits, whether it's particle baits, boilies, glugs, that sort of thing. And you can't control the strength you're using. Even if you're glugging one hook bait, how can you control how strong that is? If you make your own dips, for example, which lots of people do, thousands of people make their own dips, and they put all sorts of different things in, whether it's from amino and liver compounds to glycerin, molasses, corn steep liquor, flavours, additives, oils. The list is endless. I won't list them all. And then they'll leave their hook bait swirling round in that for a day, 2 days, a week, 2 weeks, maybe an hour before they go fishing. But do they actually then, when they get a bite on those baits, have they taken a note of which one they used and how long the preparation process was, and can it be replicated? So my argument is, if you can't exactly replicate what you're doing with a dip and a glugged bait, don't do it. Have control by cracking one egg in a bowl, making your own hook baits, adding exactly a measured amount of flavour by using a syringe. Then you can repeat that time and time again. And if you want to do over-flavoured hook baits, which I do use when I go on holiday, because or when I'm on a long session, but it's a one-off, or perhaps I'm on a guest trip, I will use perhaps slightly over-flavoured bait, because I'm not going to be going back.
What about like hemp oil, sardine oil, those type of oils rather than flavours? I mean, is your opinion the same on those sort of ingredients? No,
I think they're great additives, particularly in method mix and stick mixes and that sort of thing. I really rate anything that comes, tuna, mashed up tuna,
natural
stuff, those sorts of things. I like any of the hydrolyzed proteins, fish proteins, shrimp extracts, that sort of thing. There's a bit of a shortage of krill at the moment because of the fact that the factory ships have closed down.
So what can we expect there with krill in the future then? Because obviously krill boilies have been in fashion the last few years.
I think they will go.
Really?
Well, I've been using krill since 1993.
There's no substitute for it?
No. Not well. A friend of mine who has helped me an awful lot, actually, Dr. Malcolm Berry. You will have heard me mention his name before. He's a PhD chemist, formerly from GlaxoSmithKline, and he's now running his own business. He's a clever guy, and he's able to put things in perspective. So he's helped me a lot with, shall we say, calming me down from my enthusiasm and putting things in perspective about why things work. He's helped me understand why things work a little better. And he helped me find the shrimp extract that I currently sell.
Fantastic flavour, that is.
It's unbelievable stuff. I mean, it's a byproduct of the shrimp farming industry in the Far East. You have to buy it in 1 ton lots, so I had to go to a friend of mine in the industry who had a DEFRA license to bring it in, because I no longer have that license. When I shut the business down many moons ago, when I was a bit poorly, about 15, 16 years ago, I closed a big factory unit down, and I stopped buying everything in massive bulk. But fortunately, I've kept friendly with an awful lot of people. So if I want to bring some unusual products in, I can make a few friendly phone calls and use other people's licenses to bring things in.
He's got this fancy machine, hasn't he, that can break down all the different compounds within a flavour.
Well, there's lots of people who've got those machines. You have to go to the laboratories, and obviously they had those machines at GlaxoSmithKline. And now he's left, I can say that, so he's not going to get in trouble. But yeah, various things can be tested. But going back to Malcolm, he found that shrimp extract, so he has to take the credit for that. But also he's helped me understand some interesting things and put things in perspective about flavours, which we can discuss, at any point. When you want. I mean, now if you like, or
no, that's fine.
Later.
Can I just get back to the krill thing? So you were saying that there was was it a South American company that were producing krill? Was that right?
Yeah. In actual fact, I've got to give credit to a chap called Brian Garner, who was an original partner at Nutribaits.
That's right.
Yeah, and he used to buy my flavours. Funny that. He used to work for Nutribaits, but he bought my flavours. That happens more than you might think.
Yeah, there you go.
Much more than you might think. You'd be surprised who buys my flavours, which is why I did the poem.
Which is brilliant. That's why we got you on. We want to hear all this stuff, John.
So Brian Garner is chatting to me, and he says he comes from the Stoke area, and he's an ex-miner. He's a tough character. I wasn't expecting to talk about Brian Garner today, but hey,
this is what happens.
That's the beauty of the podcast, isn't it?
It certainly is, Toby. And anyway, he rang me up and he said, "Oh, can you send me some more, whatever it was? I can't remember what he bought. He used to like the crab flavour." So I said, "No problem at all." And I said, I'm looking to develop a new base mix that gets me away from the standard fish meals. And what I'm after is, I've heard on the grapevine there's some really good hydrolyzed fish extracts. People call them pre-digested. It's a nonsensical expression, pre-digested. It's hydrolyzed. So the cell wall's been split with an enzyme reaction, and then it's dried. And that's things like CPSP90, which is certainly, to use another sort of analogy, it would be one of the Rolls Royces of ingredients. So I was chatting away to Brian, and he went, "Oh, I know where you can get that." I won't do the Stoke-on-Trent accent because I can't. And he said, "You want to contact this guy called Shane Misso from Ocean Proteins." And then this was literally back in 1993. And he said he can get, it's called BioCP then, and it comes from Santiago in South America. And he said, but get a look at the krill they do as well. It's mega. It comes from the factory ships down near Antarctica, and it's actually manufactured on board the ships. So I said, "Oh, gotta have a look at that." So I rang this guy up, and you had to buy a minimum order quantity. So I bought loads of it, and I had the space, and that's how I created my original mix, which is exactly the same today, bio shellfish. So bio shellfish contained krill, and still contains krill, and CPSP90, a lot of it. And so it's very digestible. It's got a unique smell and taste. I mean, there's 17 ingredients.
And you sold a liquid krill as well, didn't you?
I did sell a liquid krill in later years when it became available. Fantastic. You could buy it through a few agents in the Northern Hemisphere. And then suddenly I rang up I had these really expensive labels done, and I bought a photograph and had these labels done because it was such a great ingredient. And, I used to just dispense it exactly as it came in the big vats, put it straight in the bottle. And then I rang up a couple of years ago and asked for some, and they said it's not available anymore. And I said, well, it must be.
What do you mean? Yeah.
I got all sorts of stories, but the plant that makes it up, I don't know the real reason. It would be wrong of me to guess, but we'll just assume that it was politically wrong to start harvesting the sea of krill. I do know they shut one of the factory ships down. I think the product is still available, but with very limited distribution.
Did you say that krill represented like the biggest biomass?
Yeah,
in
the ocean.
In the ocean,
and still does.
What? And they're trying to protect that. They don't.
I think it's become, the planet's going green. We wish it would go green. Maybe krill. The people that harvest krill don't want to put any further investment into their very expensive harvesting ships, the process of it, because it isn't. It isn't the thing to do now, Simon.
So that will be it then?
It would be...
Because it can't be replicated or anything, can
No.
it? It's a natural ingredient, so...
It's a natural ingredient. I don't know what the future of it is. It's one thing. So that's why Malcolm, my friend, and I started to source another hydrolyzed protein, which is the shrimp, which is sold by other people. Because one of the big problems is that once you find something or you invent something, whether it's a piece of tackle or a bait, if it's good, it's going to be copied.
I use the we'll talk about we drop names of companies, but I was using the Trent bait shrimp for a few years. It was absolutely devastating. It was devastating. I've never seen a bait turn a water over like that, really. I mean, there was a few of us using it, but there was undoubtedly something. I know we got a picture actually, Tobe, of the caddis on your boilies.
Yeah.
And I was seeing that on their hook baits as well. Every time you'd wind them in, there was like, yeah, that sort of stuff.
Well, this is
not quite as big as that, actually.
No, this is a very good example of when you know that the boilie ingredients in your bait is something special. These are all caddis, and when you drop a bait in the margins and you've got a water that's particularly rich. I can remember fishing one particular lake, and I looked down and I put a boilie in about 2 hours before, just to see, how it went in the margins, and like you do, and looked down. I couldn't see it. I thought, well, it can't be eaten, and it was covered in these caddis. They migrated towards it and were eating it. And
you could compare other baits to that as well, and to see what the reaction's like as well, could you? I mean, they quite selective about what they choose to sort of cling to.
Well, I think they are. They're naturally attracted. They're a wild thing, and same as a carp, and they're naturally attracted to it. There's actually something which has just triggered in my mind that you've just got me going on something. There's a little test that you can do where you want to test a bait out. And the best way to test a new bait out that you're making yourself, so all the guys that are making their own base mix at home, and that is to, first of all, use the powder with eggs as a paste, go and test it, make boilies with it, but don't put any flavour at all. Just use the mix completely as it is. And there's a test that you can do. And if you've got a local lake overstocked with small fish, roach, rudd, small carp, a match lake, that sort of thing, just break up some boilies and throw them in the edge. This is particularly good on rivers. If you've got a river bridge and you've got lots of little dace and chub, in the water, and throw bits of the bait in, and they should come straight to it and start to, demolish it. And there'll be, hordes of them all around it, like when you throw a bread crust in, and they keep nibbling away at it until until it's gone, and you think, wow, that bread crust didn't last very long. It's really interesting to note when you throw in certain types of bait, let's just leave it like that, how the fish react to it, and they very often don't eat it at all.
Right.
It sinks to the bottom. They keep coming along and pick it up and blow it out again. This is the same for boilies as well, but they never get eaten, which is why you will have heard, and I certainly have heard many times, from fishery owners in the UK and in France, where a lot of bait is used and a lot of preserved bait, and they've sent divers in and the bait's rotting on the bottom.
Obviously, you don't like preserved bait. I mean,
well, sorry about that. But
but I mean, so for you, bait always has to be fresh. I mean, that's a given straight away.
Well, I think it's paramount. You know, if you're going to the trouble of making your own, especially, and you can gear up your preparation process to using it as fresh as possible. I mean, let's assume, you're fishing on the weekend and you're making, a kilo or a couple of kilos of bait. That's not much. It's just 12 eggs. So you could make that over 2 evenings on a Monday or a Tuesday. You don't need to freeze it. You can just air dry it for 6 to 8 hours, put it in the fridge, sealed up in a plastic bag, and it'll be perfectly fine for the weekend. And if you buy a pre-prepared meal in a supermarket, it will have on it, use by the 22nd of July or whatever, and you can keep that 7, 8, 9, 10 days. If you buy it well before the use by date. Well, it's the same for making boilies. You don't need to freeze them, and you certainly don't need preservative. I mean, obviously, there's a whole trade, and the bait companies are brilliant. They've got some excellent preservatives which they use, and I know what they are. They're fine.
How does a preservative affect a bait once you start adding preservatives to it?
Well, I think it's the same as over-engineering. These baits are over-engineered in a way. Does that make sense? So when you're making, if you're using preservative, there's a reason why your customers want those preserved baits, because they don't have the facilities to store it at home, so they want preserved bait. They're going on holiday with no facilities to store it in the freezer, and it's just convenient. So you can grab a bag and go. Fantastic. And it catches fish. Of course it catches fish. I've caught fish on preserved bait. Nothing wrong with it at all. And certainly modern preserved baits are miles better than they ever used to be. But all preservatives carry a taste, so you're putting in colour, flavour, sweetener to counteract the taste of the preservative and the flavour. You've got a boilie that's got to catch fish, appeal to anglers, have a shelf life, because you don't know how long it's going to sit in a shop or in an angler's tackle bag. So, there's very good reasons why preservatives should be used. I've got to be careful what I say, because I've heard a little whisper that even if you buy frozen bait in the belief that it's fresh, some bait companies are just making massive batches of boilies and putting preservatives in all of it.
Right.
So when you're buying a frozen bait, it actually has preservatives in it as well.
Can you see that the way the bait, should a good bait turn fairly quickly then?
Depends on the temperature, the ambient temperature it's stored.
But if a bait's not turning, is that suggesting that there's some sort of preservative in it?
Oh yes. And
we've seen that, haven't we?
Yeah, definitely.
Right. So not necessarily anything to do with the quality of the ingredient, but there must be something that's stopping that bait from turning.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, excuse me, I believe that there could be a correlation between the excessive use of preserved bait, particularly on commercial fisheries, on holiday venues, anywhere really, why couldn't it be anywhere? Where it's disturbing the flora, the natural bacteria in a carp's gut. They'll eat anything. They're only fish. If it's a free meal, whether it's got preservatives in it or not, they'll eat it. But if you were to show a preference, for example, your human food, what do you prefer to eat? A dehydrated packet of pasta with a sauce that you tip the sachet in and heat it up with a kettle of boiling water, or something that you've cooked fresh. The tastes are completely different, and the whole thing is a different eating experience, and surely that also is the case with fresh bait. I mean, people that are very serious about their fishing will only use
fresh bait.
I
know you like to be a bit different as well, and maybe go against the grain. So, regarding baiting teams and stuff that you would find on lakes, I mean, do you find that even if a group of anglers are using all the same bait and the bait's working, I've experienced this, do you think there is a lifespan to that, or can a bait continually keep producing if it keeps being applied to the lake, or do the fish eventually just get fed up and look for something else?
I think if you take that to the nth degree, Simon, where you have perhaps relatively smallish lakes, say up to about 15 acres, to put a size on it and put some context into my reply. So maybe 15 to 20 acre lakes, well stocked, typical club lake, where lots of freedom to fish as long as you want, long sessions, so minimal rules. So there's lots of swim rotation, baiting schools. I'm using Dave's bait from down the road, or I'm using this bait or that bait, whatever it is. And there's a group of 6 guys. We've all heard it before, so I don't need to enlarge on that. It goes further where you have lakes, again, of this same rough, typical club lake size, where as a bait advisor, shall we say, because not everybody that contacts me always uses my products. They might use other people's products, and they ask me my opinion on other people's products, which is always difficult because I don't know exactly what they're using, but you have to help where you can. And so they say, there's 10 people all using Dave's bait from Acme Rolling Company, whoever it's going to be. And I say, great, that's fantastic. So to answer your question, if the fish are getting the same bait, they're getting the same level of nutrition, the same vitamin and mineral profile, or whatever else is in it, you go there as one individual on their own, just going fishing your way, doing your own thing, whether you've got a young family and you can only fish once a week or whatever it is. If you use a really good fresh bait and it's different and it's nutritionally well balanced, you'll catch from the off without pre-baiting.
There you go. Should we talk a little bit about baiting strategies as well? I know you listened to Pete Regan's podcast.
I did.
And Pete knows his stuff, doesn't he?
He does. I don't know Pete. I know of him. Our paths just simply haven't crossed. But he did say several things that I really agreed with. And he's got a great sense of humour too.
That's one way to put it.
We've been on the end of that a few times.
John, I call it a unique sense of humour, actually.
If you're listening to this.
Yeah, a friend of mine said, yes, Pete, he's an acquired taste.
Absolutely. That friend is spot on.
But, yeah, I love some of the stuff he said because it could have been me. I'm not, taking away any of Pete's thunder, but he's a very experienced angler. He has a lot of downtime when he can't fish in his professional career when he was, a pilot on a boat. Yeah. Which is fascinating, a very responsible job. So he had a lot of time to think. And I liked some of the things he said about using big boilies. I think we've got a picture somewhere of some big boilies, or whether we have or whether we haven't. 22 millers, 24 millers. Who uses those? For a start, with little effort, you can get them out. You can use nice random baiting patterns. So
Pete's baiting pattern was bigger baits spread out, really,
bigger baits spread out.
We got a picture of that, Tobe. Yeah.
I like that. some of the ingredients he used, particularly one that he said he used ground maple peas. Well, you can make I'm sure Pete knows this, but you can make a perfectly good boilie without eggs using maple pea meal. I've been grinding maple peas since I was about 6. No, literally I've been grinding maple. I love grinding baits and releasing all the oils and seeds. But you can there we go. Yes. Now this is great. This slide.
So we're looking at a slide now of potentially larger baits scattered across the swim, and we're looking at a picture of your 2 rods and how you would actually where you put your rods in comparison to the baited area.
Yeah, it's an example of where I cast. So, you are literally for the last, I don't know how long, many years, I don't tend to use spods.
No.
I actually went to France for a whole week once, and I didn't take a marker rod, and I didn't take a spod or measuring sticks.
I tried that the other day. It was tricky.
Yeah. But what I do like doing is using this tactic on any lake, anywhere, and recasting quite regularly.
How regularly would you recast, John?
Every 2 or 3 hours.
Wow.
And what was the purpose of that?
Well, if you're using a random baiting pattern, you're keeping the fish on the move. And if you know your bait's good and they're going to eat it straight away, you don't even think about the bait. The bait's an afterthought when you're there on the bank. So this type of, bearing in mind that we're talking about 40 to 50 yards of open baiting, but only with maybe 100 baits.
That's a big area.
It's a big area. I mean, I'm exaggerating slightly because it depends who's fishing to your right, who's fishing to your left, the type of lake, the swim, the depth, all those things. But this would be, a typical random pattern. And Toby, to answer your question about, how often you do this, how many people do you hear say, "Oh, I've left my bait out all night and I still haven't reeled in"? Well, if you've got your hook baits exactly right, and you're using a low level of flavour in your free offerings, the fish, when they're coming across a concentrated bed of bait, and there's another slide which would demonstrate this, or another picture later, they're not coming across this big explosion of flavour in a water column. So they're more likely to move across an open baited area. And I think when Pete Regan was discussing this, he wanted to go further in his explanation of this. So sorry, Pete, if I've used a bit of your idea. But how many people have got the confidence to do this? Okay, probably quite a few. How many people really do it? Probably quite a few. But this is my go-to tactic. And then I fish for, the old classic fish for donks. So as long as you've got a rough idea of the topography of the lake bed you're fishing over, so I'm not suggesting you don't do a bit of groundwork first, so you visit the lake before you actually do some serious sessions in the closed season with a marker rod and a book, and you're sussing out the depths, the spots, the silt, the this, the that, and you've made some really accurate notes.
Does this apply to spot fishing as well, feature fishing? Would you, if you had gravel bars and stuff out in front of you, would you still adopt that tactic, even if you were putting baits on top of gravel bars, down the sides of bars, etc.?
Yeah. Keep it. I wouldn't spot on them because everyone else does that.
Yeah, I do that.
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
I've been next to people people that you would know. There are some old school anglers that look absolutely horrendous with the throwing stick, and they're doing exactly what you've just said there. Yeah, they do catch a few. You think, look at that lucky devil. Well,
look, this is not tablets of stone. No method or tactic is tablets of stone, is it? You're not, you don't say, this is all I do and I don't do anything.
Yeah, exactly.
But, it's horses for courses. There might be fish moving 6 foot out from the margin. No one fishes there. So in order to find out whether you can get a bite, you've got to put a rod there all night long. So I'm not going to reel that in every 2 hours. But I think it's about the interpretation of the venue that you're at and the groundwork that you do about the behaviours of other anglers. And particularly on rivers, this is the case, where key swims are often targeted by fanatical barbel anglers, and you can't buy a bite in those rivers, in those particular swims, even though the fish visit them to clean off whatever bait's been put in, until the fish are 100% sure there's no anglers there. So very often I know people that are visiting pressurised stretches of river with a low population of very big barbel, and they're going there, at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they're really successful. Again, that's understanding. That's an extreme example, but it's about understanding your venue, and it certainly doesn't take weeks to establish any new bait. 3 days max, on a river, and on a lake. There's studies to indicate that carp can evaluate the nutritional content and acceptability of a boilie in 20 minutes.
Something else you said on the Carp Chronicles, the podcast, wasn't it? Did you say that the receptors in a carp's mouth, the older the fish gets, the better the more sensitive they are to taste?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, there's been some studies done by several academic studies. There's been some carried out by a professor in Italy, and there's other work being done. Suffice to say that a very high resolution electron microscope has been used to photograph the taste receptors on the skin of carp, and it's apparent that in older fish the taste receptors have multiplied, so they are more aware of the surroundings the older they get, which makes sense. When you've got the reproduction process, the genetic survival of a species is down to the strongest survive. We've heard this before. Big bull elephants, they're the ones survive. Lions will fight to the death in order to sire the next litter of cubs, on the Serengeti plains. And you've got David Attenborough saying, it's very, very sad, but we didn't see Simba the next day. Why? Yeah. Because he's been killed by 2 of his brothers.
Yeah.
And it's the same with carp, I believe, which brings us, in actual fact, neatly onto, again, the subject of the evaluation of that which appears in nature, and why flavours work. So this natural ability for carp to evaluate their surroundings, well, of course they would do, wouldn't they? Because they live there. So, carp were in existence millions of years before humans. So this all sounds very obvious, but when you put it into context, it makes you realise why the hell we are using confectionery flavours that are made by sweet manufacturers and flavour companies that are selling strawberry flavour and plum flavour and cream flavours and vanilla flavours. Why are they appealing to fish? And it's obvious. And again, a pal of mine, Malcolm Berry, Dr. Malcolm Berry, he put this into context for me. It's obvious, but he made it more obvious by saying, well, hang on a second. Carp have been around for a millennium. What about elderberries? What about elderflower? Wild strawberries, or cherries, or plums, or I've mentioned in earlier clips and things, about the fact I caught a chub, and it regurgitated a plum. Fruit falls off trees, fish eat fruit, so therefore the natural aroma chemicals that are present in all the fruits and berries and nuts and things that fall into the water were around long before we were about on Earth. So therefore it stands to reason that these fish are attracted to the flavours we use in bait. And it's very exciting, because you could say, couldn't you, Simon, but these are natural products. Well, flavour technology is a wonderful thing. Chemistry is a wonderful thing. You can mimic exactly chemically, and you can manufacture flavours that are exactly the same as that which appears in nature. The aroma compounds within the fruit are the same. So you can...
nature identical.
Nature identical, natural, or artificial. And the best bait flavours are a combination of natural and nature identical.
When these flavours are formulated, how do you know? So you would take a strawberry, and you would examine the different aroma ingredients inside it, and say it had 18 different aroma chemicals in it. What, and you just replicate that, or is it a sort of a trial and error thing where you're just adding extra aroma ingredients to it until?
It used to be trial and error and guesswork, and if the stars were aligned, etc. It did used to be that, and there's a little bit of that goes into it now, and it would be wrong of me to say that it's all it's all of an exact science. It's not an exact science, but it is down to whether that bobbin's going to start flying up and down. So it does. I mean, I've had 45 years of customer feedback to tell me which things work and which things don't.
It's amazing.
And believe me, I have had phone calls with people who say, "John, that flavour's crap."
Yeah.
Or it's, the dose rate that you've told me to use is too much. I caught more fish using half what you suggested.
So based on that, I mean, if you were fishing a water with older fish in it, would you be adjusting your flavour levels and whatever else you got in the bait to that water, or is that just going a little bit too far?
No, I would.
Would you?
Yeah, if I was targeting a big old, warrior.
Yeah.
In an ill-frequented, mysterious reservoir or pond or something somewhere, and you got a good idea what's already been used, so I'd use the opposite and give it a diet and a food which I think is going to appeal to it and not repel it.
Can I get onto like baiting quantities and stuff? I mean, are you a fan of like mass baiting, or would you rather just use smaller quantities of bait?
I think if the bait's good, you don't need a large quantity, and it does depend where you're fishing. The thing is that about these bankside behaviours that I was discussing earlier on, and about knowing what other people are doing, it's quite difficult often, particularly if you're not a regular on a given venue, to know what's going down at the lake. Who's using what, how much are they throwing in. So I would not be a fan on most venues today, particularly in the last couple of years where waters have been fished much more heavily because people have had spare time on furlough, that sort of thing. So to answer your question, even if you're using any type of boilie, whether it's out of a packet, whether you've made it yourself, experimental, something that you've bought from an artisan bait supplier like myself, give it a try. Start off with hook baits and free offerings which are matching. I can never see the point in using...
Nor can I. I don't get it.
A different pop-up over the top.
Because it's like what you were saying with the levels of like when you talk about soaking baits, you don't really know how much liquid that individual bait is absorbed.
No, you don't know how strong
and
the bait
but
is.
you're creating this scenario where you, like you say, you don't know what's actually worked there. You don't know. It's like using 3 different rigs all the time, isn't it? And 3 different colours. I mean, the more different combinations you've got, the more confusing it gets.
You're so right, and if you're going to use, boilies, for example, then use the same boilie on all rods, the same matching hook baits on all rods, so that if you catch a fish off that particular spot there, that drop off, that bar, that silt area, whatever it is, you can put 2 rods on it. You haven't got to think, I've only got enough bait for that rod, and I've bought this bait for that rod and that. I've done all that, and it's a mess. It's an absolute mess.
Yeah.
If you say, I can use 3 rods on this lake, so I'm going to put particles on one rod and boilies on the other 2.
Mm. The only thing I did do the other day, we were fishing quite a well-stocked water, and I love Sweetcorn. I think it's an amazing bait, and if it's never been used on a water before, we do this on a lake that I'm not fishing, but if it's not being used on a water regularly, using sweetcorn, just sweetcorn on its own can be devastating. But I know that this lake's been fed with trout pellets as well, and it's like and they haven't been fished for very much. So I thought, well, I need to give the trout pellets a go as well. So I fished pellet on one rod over a baited area, and then I fished my normal sweetcorn method about 30 yards apart. I thought I had to try it, and do you know what? I didn't get a single bite on the bed of sweetcorn. So there are scenarios where sometimes, because that surprised me, and I made sure that the rods were at the same distance. They weren't cutting each other off, but they were just at the right distance to be able to see a fair comparison. And I think from that, actually, I did get some sort of a comparison based on that session anyway. But generally speaking, especially on low stock waters and stuff, it's like you're making life very, very difficult for yourself.
On low stock waters or waters that aren't frequently fished, I think sweetcorn is absolutely brilliant. It's one of the best baits you can possibly even think of using. A pal of mine got exclusive rights to fish a lake in Spain, and he rang me up and he said, I'm out here on secondment for a couple of months. I'm going to make some boilies. And I said, well, just go to the supermarket and buy some cat food and scald it and make some paste and all that. He did all that because he was an old school carp angler, and he blanked. And he said, he said, there's carp jumping out, I can't catch them. And I said, go and buy some sweetcorn then.
Yeah.
And he went and bought some tins of sweetcorn, and he caught loads straight away. And he just eat it. And I've done the same in America when I fished, totally unfished rivers out there and caught them. In fact, when we first started using sweetcorn, we used to get bite-offs. This was before the hair rig. And Pete Regan would have suffered this as well, because he's same sort of age group as me, and literally all the other likely contenders that we know, all the old has-beens like us lot. But when it was like using a hair rig, literally when the word went out that sweetcorn was the bait, I was fishing a lake in Hertfordshire at the time, and there was a particular guy who became a pivotal part of my reason for coming into bait, specialist bait, using it myself, not selling it, just using it. And I caught him using sweetcorn.
You caught him using
I caught him using sweetcorn. I caught him twice. I caught him once using sweetcorn and once using high protein boilies.
Right.
And I'll get on to the second part in a minute. Anyway, we were using sweetcorn and having multiple catches of fish. But if you used the sort of normal hook link, which was probably say 9-10 inches or a bit longer in those days, we used to use longer hook links, 12 inches, 15 inches. You were getting bite-offs on 15-pound hook links. Well, this is no good. We don't want to leave tackle and hooks in fish. So we started shortening the hook links down. And this guy, Barry Florence was his name, sadly passed away now. He's an amazing character. And he took sweetcorn fishing to the next degree. He really caught an awful lot of fish wherever he went. And he went up to fish some lakes in Cambridgeshire, which I later fished with Kevin Maddox, and the story of that will come out later.
Yeah.
And he caught one of the very early first 20-pound commons. He was a very good angler. If you bumped into him in the street, Barry Florence, his characters, that define our fishing, and this is very clear in my mind. He had shoulder length, lank, greasy hair, about 7 teeth. He was very thin. He swore every other word. It was terrible. And he drank milk from pint glass bottles.
Did he?
Yeah. And was so noisy fishing next to him. And yet his tackle was immaculate. He hand-built all his rods with intermediate whippings. His rods were a work of art. And he was actually a cabinet maker, a master cabinet maker. So looks are deceiving, aren't they?
They are.
The guy looked like a tramp.
Is he still around?
No, he passed away, unfortunately.
Right.
Some years ago. But this was the guy where, when the baits, Fred Wilton, wrote his lovely article in this original book, the Carp study book.
There we go.
British
If you want to
Carp
hold that
study
up to the camera there, John, yeah.
Here it is. the original issue of the BCSG.
That looks very well looked after. That's the original issue.
This is the original issue, dated 1972.
Wow.
And in here, Fred Wilton wrote the amazing article.
I've got a copy of that.
Yeah.
So I done his homework.
So I gave you a copy of that when
You
I came
did.
out. And he goes into the vitamins and minerals and why they used it, and the fact that he wanted to give a fish an all-in-one food. And that was in 1972. I was how old was I? I was 18. 54, 64, 74. Yeah, I was 18. The secrets from the BCSG were quite closely guarded, and a lot of this information didn't come out for a couple of years because in those days a secret was more of a secret than it is now.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have mobile phones, social media. Anyway, Barry, after a few years, I can't remember the exact year it was, but it was maybe 74, 75. He was obviously in the know, and he started using high-protein bait, which was diametrically opposite to everything we were using. We were still using cat food paste, luncheon meat, sweet corn, all the usual things. And they wouldn't tell me what... I was quite young, and they wouldn't tell me what bait they were using. And you know when you walk around lakes sometimes, club lakes or syndicate lakes, and the car park's in one particular corner, sometimes you tend to walk around the lake clockwise or in the same way. There's just like a habit that you get in, that you walk around. Anyway, if you're fishing a swim, you expect people to come from your right on this particular lake because the pathway was easier. And then the walk to that swim from the other direction was more branches, and you had to push the stinging nettles to one side, that sort of thing. Anyway, I knew Barry because I recognised his car was fishing, so I decided to sneak up on him, and I went the other way round and forced my way through all the nettles and brambles, and I caught him at the point of casting out with a great big round boilie dangling off the end of his... And of course it was overhanging trees, so his rod was virtually poking my eye out with his boilie hanging off it. And he quickly cast it out and he went, "Oh, you shouldn't have seen that. You shouldn't have seen that." So I said, "Oh, you're using special baits then, Barry?" "Oh, you'll never find out what this is," he said. "In a million years, you will never find out what I'm using." And I said to him, "Thank you. That's the best thing you could have ever said to me."
That's an incentive.
It was a massive incentive. But I cannot underestimate how mega that was, because I felt affronted and belittled because I was young and I was so keen it hurt. And this guy was belittling me, saying, "You'll never find out what I'm using." And I said to him, "Not only will I find out what you're using, but I'll be using it myself within a few weeks."
What did he say?
I can't tell you exactly what he said, but it wasn't very...
It was dismissive.
It was unparliamentary language.
Was it?
Yeah.
So how do you think he... how did he get onto boilies, do you think? Who was he hanging around with at the time?
Well, he was a bit older. He had a bit more cash. You know, he was probably hanging around with... I can't think of the names now. I'm sorry, it was a long time ago. But there was quite a guy who fished Ashley Pool called Barry Chapman. And there was, a few other guys, long time ago now, but they would have been in the know.
So boilies do go back a hell of a long time then, don't they? Really? I mean, you're going back early 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Really, on most fisheries, they weren't extensively used until the mid-70s. But in that such short window, Simon, only 5 years, then the hair rig came along. So we had boilies, and then we had the hair rig, and it was such a short window.
Yeah, so 1981 was quite a poignant year, really, wasn't it, in carp fishing for you?
Wow, yeah, it was. Not only did I get my ticket for Savay Lake, which was the place to be to, but also it was. Sort of culmination of a friendship with a very controversial character, Kevin Maddox, who'd been part of my life for several years. I used to make all his bait for him, and I knew Lenny Middleton, and the hair rig was out by then.
How did your paths cross with Kevin Maddox and Lenny Middleton?
Crikey, I've never been asked that before. Well, we both lived in North London, Enfield area, and whilst we didn't fish the same waters, Kevin had the ability of getting people to do things for him and getting his own way. And he contacted me through mainly the CAA and the British Carp Study Group, which I was very active in. And so we met through the BCSG. And I think I'd been a member for a couple of years by then. I'd got membership. So I would have met him at a meeting. So close was the friendship that eventually we used to run meetings, and when the BCSG used to run the big shows before the Carp Society came along, I was on the committee for arranging the big shows at the Wembley Conference Centre, places like that. So there was a group of us, and we used to organise the shows there. So I was really keen. I was into all of it then.
What sort of a character was he? When you first met him, was he a well-known angler then? I mean, did he seem ahead of the game then, or?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, he made himself well known. He set out his stall to become a commercial carp angler, and was a pioneer in that regard. The only person that would have come close to him before that time would have been Jerry Savage. Kevin was, and still is, although I haven't spoken to him for 2 or 3 years, since he, moved away from Marpesh Lakes, and he's got a new woman in his life now after his other wife sadly died. I think he's emigrated to Spain or Portugal now. But yes, we lived close together. We were involved in the BCSG, and he obviously picked my brains, as everybody seems to, for bait ideas. And how could I sum Kevin up? He's a very selfish guy. I would tell him that to his face. Good company, but he has to have his own way. And me being a bit younger than him, a bit gullible, I guess I was a yes man a little bit. At Savay, the guys on the Looney Rotor, Rod in particular, took the piss out of me, and they used to call me Kevin's gopher.
Did they?
Yeah, which really annoyed me. So yeah, it's a bit like Marmite is Kevin, mostly the don't like bit, unless you really know him. When it comes to fishing with him, brilliant company, providing he has his own way. Oh, I really wanted that swim. Oh, I can hear him say it now. But we worked closely together, and obviously I helped him write this book here, Carp Fever.
We've had that one sat on that, which is a...
You've had that one sat on the table a long time.
Well, I mean, I know you had a chapter in it, but I didn't realise how much involvement you actually had in that book. So Kevin approached you with the idea of writing a book.
Kevin approached me, and he needed a photographer, so I did all the photographs. He also needed somebody, in his words, to flower up his writing, because he couldn't write. So really, me and Peter Mohan had formed the BCSG, lovely guy, well-educated, ex-school headmaster. Between us, we transposed Kevin's diaries, and he kept meticulous diaries. Meticulous! To the point of logging every bite and twitch. So he had, 10 years worth of diaries. And then we sort of said, well, look, you've got to put some backbone and framework to the book. There's got to be a section on this and a section on that. And he said, well, there needs to be a bait section as well. He said, I don't know anything about bait. Will you write it for me? So not only Peter really went through the whole book with a fine-tooth comb, and he wrote the book, really. He was a ghostwriter.
Is that book then? Is that a true representation of Kevin, or is that Kevin's language, or is that
no? It's not Kevin's language.
That's Peter.
It's Peter Mohan and my language.
Right.
I wrote the entire bait chapter, and much to my annoyance, he wanted me to publish the name of some flavour manufacturers, because and they're in the book. That most of them don't exist now. They've been gone. They're gone. But he was a weird character because he said, "Oh no, we've had the best of it. Tell everybody. Let's share all the information." I couldn't believe it. It's his book, so he can do what he liked. But in that book, a number of interesting things came out, because that's where, due to his incredible tenacity, we tested flavours in a tank, and we did it pretty carefully. So we wanted to test flavours. We tested flavours. Kevin went to a company called Sigma Aldrich, who are a chemical supplier, the biggest in the world. They're now owned by Merck. And he bought all 26 amino acids, the key amino acids, the main ones. And we tested them in solution by pouring them down a funnel. It's in the book. In solution into the tank and noting the fish's reaction. But we actually got much better reactions from using certain flavours. Right. And I've discussed this before. People have often asked me, how do you establish what flavour is going to be?
How many field testers you've got,
how many field testers,
etc., etc.
Yeah, well, I've got all the field testers you can think of, thousands of them, because
customers.
Yeah. But in the early days, we did have to experiment, and it was really interesting to see. I mean, when we put liquefied tubifix into the tank, the fish went bonkers. Liquidized earthworm as well, and they were hitting the tin lid on the top of the tank. But then they also went crazy for maple, which is a complex flavour with fenugreek in and all sorts of earlier resins. And we also tested one of the eugenol, isoeugenol, which I've spoken about before. But I then went on he asked me about 1981. I got a ticket for Savay, and I used an experimental bait recipe. Can you believe it? I didn't use something which I knew would work. I used an experimental bait. And in actual fact, I have brought it, so I will read it, because I caught my first 30 on isoeugenol and cream blended together. Right, okay. Which I call butt ringer now. I still sell it.
Yeah, I know. I've seen that. And there's a picture of the fish there.
Yeah, that's a Leany mirror. And I'm in the bonfire swim.
You're in the bonfire.
And it was great because Jeff Kemp was there, Rod Hutchinson was there, Kevin Maddox was there, and they all came. Mike Wilson was there, and they all came and stood. Look how young I look.
That was a massive fish for that period as well, and the fish looks about 50 years old there, doesn't it?
Looks like an old-looking fish.
Yeah, I mean, what have they been in the lake? Maybe I don't know, maybe 30 years then, maybe.
Yeah.
John, sorry, how old were you there? Do you know?
You look very young.
26.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was 26, and I caught that fish on a hook link that was 1 inch for every year of my life. A 26-inch hook link.
Was it? Right.
Yeah, and a 2.5-inch hair. In actual fact, let me just...
So like Kevin, you're a meticulous person. You keep diaries as well.
No, I stopped about 15 years ago.
Right.
When I was ill.
Yeah.
I was ill about 15 years ago, and I just thought, I don't need to do all this. This is too much like work. I'll just go fishing for fun. I'm not going to catalogue everything. And I do record the weights of a lot of fish. I write them down on whatever I've got handy at the time. And I've got weights of fish on the back of a sweet bag. I've got weights on the back of a brochure for Marpêche, because I did particularly well at Marpêche. And... yeah, and I've got those kept in a book.
But it was always more for facts and figures rather than nostalgia, looking back now.
Well, to get into the BCSG, you had to keep meticulous notes. So it became a habit to keep, unless you could prove by making meticulous notes, what you'd caught, how many hours fishing you had to do, a minimum amount of hours. It was very school teacherish because it was run by Peter Moen. So it was, lots of people wouldn't join the BCSG because they said it was, too much like going back to school.
God, that's old-fashioned.
It was very old-fashioned, yeah.
Anyway.
So the 15th of... I did go to Savay Lake on the 15th of June, arrived 9:30 on Monday, decided to fish the island with Kevin. wind in the northwest, very few fish moving, although one did take a free offering of floater, who uses floater these days. Uneventful night, except for some line bites and bream-type twitches. So that was, then we went home. We blanked, but I returned home to redo the bait, the new bait. We hand-rolled 1,200 boilies. Hand-rolled.
Just a few then.
Yeah. That's split between the two of us. So that's only 800 baits each. That's actually not very many.
I know, but it was a lot to do manually
By
then,
hand,
wasn't it? Yeah, God.
Doing them like this in your two hands.
Yeah.
Anyway, so June the 17th, returned after a sleep Wednesday evening. Wind still into the end of the canal bank. Nothing had been caught after we'd had a good look round. I fished the bonfire swim and pre-baited with 100 baits. Bream were rolling, and at 4:30 I had a screaming run in the middle rod, 2.5-inch hair rig, 26-inch link, 13-pound mirror. Kevin lost the fish at 2:30, a still misty morning. Kevin had another fish of 17 in the margins under the trees, and at 8:15 I had a screaming take on the middle rod, and the fish tore off 80 yards of line, a fast run, heavy, dogged fight. Almost lost it under the trees, and Kevin netted it for me at 30 pounds 8, a lovely mirror. Rod and all the lads came down to see. Plenty of photographs. The rest of the day, fish moving, and so it goes on. I mean,
that's very nostalgic now, though, John, isn't it? To hear all that.
It was. I can remember it as if it was yesterday.
You didn't get on the very first rotor, did you? Was it
No.
the second year you got on it?
Well, that's another example of Kevin letting me down, and he did let me down. And I will say it, in public. I went to America when they chose the first rotor, and I've forgotten the guy's name now that ran it then. It wasn't Pete Broxup. It was
Bob.
You had to. Bob Davis.
Bob Davis, that's it, yeah. Do you know, I always forget his name as well.
Good old Bob. And he said, yeah, you can join, John. And it was £35, I think. So I left the £35 with Kevin and said, can you pay for me? Because I'm not going to be here. She says, there's a meeting and you've got to, we've got to meet. And I said, well, look, I'm in America with my parents. We're going to visit my sister. So, here's the money. Can you pay for me? And he came up with some cock and bull story that I had to be there. And when I quizzed Bob about it later, he said he didn't say anything about you.
I mean, do you think he just forgot?
No.
He just didn't want you to fish?
No, I was competition to him because I was actually equal or better an angler than he was.
God blimey.
I used to outfish him, and when he had the hair rig. And I'll tell you a story about this. I think it was around this time. It was just before I knew about the hair rig, which I guessed anyway. He hadn't caught a 20-pound common, and this would have been in about 1980, so the year before, this pivotal year. And I was in a beautiful syndicate water in Cambridgeshire called Copley's, next door to another lake called the Bird Lake, which is in Hemmingford Grey. And they're lovely old established lakes with leanies in. And he hadn't caught a 20-pound common, Kevin. So he said, can you get me a day ticket, a guest ticket, to come with you? Because I was catching lots of fish. And we were using chickpeas and maples. The fish were virtually unfished for, so you could catch them on particles. Anyway, I took him up for a weekend. And I said, I suppose you're going to use that rig that you won't tell me about. Am I allowed to? I said, well, I can't stop you. Anyway, he caught his 20-pound common. He had one bite, and he caught his 20-pound common. I went round, took the pictures, and he was over the moon because it was, food for the book. It was material for the book. We were writing the book then. And he came into my swim, and I'd caught 3. I caught 3 doubles. But the fish was still in my swim. This is actually, will give you an idea of the level of secrecy they went to. So not only had he previously told me that he couldn't tell me what the rig was because he didn't want to betray Lenny Middleton and Keith Gilling's confidence, He came into my swim in the morning for a cup of tea. And he said, "Oh, you still got fish in your swim?" And I was getting funny twitch bites. I used to get these twitch bites like this. And you couldn't hit them and the fish would bow wave off. And he said, "Oh, if you give me your rig and don't turn round, I'll make a change to it. Then you have to cast out without looking at it."
Oh, God. Oh, my God.
And I said, "Kevin," I won't tell you exactly what I said, but I said, "Kevin, just go away and I'll fish on my own terms, thank you very much. And I'm going to sit here, and based on what you've just said, I think I've guessed what it is anyway. You're tying the bait to the hook, making the fish believe it's not attached to a fishing line."
What made you think that?
Because he'd said he wanted to do something in a short time to my rig that would get me a bite. And I sort of interpreted that as thinking, well, what can he do to an existing rig that will make the fish more confident to take it? He must be attaching the bait. And I actually said to him at the time, he said, "Well, what do you think we're doing then?" I said, "You're using fine pole elastic to make it act like an elastic." So they suck the bait in on the elastic. And he said, "Oh, we've never tried elastic. That's a good idea."
Yeah.
Which, in actual fact, I've never tried it either. He used to use a 2-pound bayer on a blue spool. He used to keep it in a cigarette tin.
So he used to tie the hire on separately back then.
Yeah, with 3 granny knots.
That's it. Yeah.
Anyway, and we use these.
Do you not find it's interesting though with the hair rig, isn't it? Oh, you got the herrings there.
I got
as
the
well.
hair.
That's what you were using at the time.
Yeah, this is.
Hold that up to the camera there, John.
So here's the old box. I used to make these boxes. And
we'll have to tell our listeners that's not static from the show.
No, that's
John's bite alarm.
that's.
This is how sensitive the alarm is. You just shake.
Wow.
Was it a bit oversensitive then?
Yeah, used to keep me awake all night long.
How long did you use those for? Not a bad sound though.
Not a bad sound.
A bit, yeah.
I used them for years. A lot of my old pictures, the old herons are in the background. I used to buy platinum contacts from a post off, a telephone spare shop, and people had the old herons, and they used to send me them. I used to convert them with a brass wire and the platinum contacts, and make these boxes. I'll unplug it because it sounds like.
So how long did you use herons for? What did you replace those with?
I replaced them with the early Delkims.
They were great.
And I've always supported Del Romang.
I never owned a set of those Delkim conversions. I was really, really close. And unfortunately, Optonic brought the XL out, which was rubbish. And I got the XLs instead of buying a second-hand set of Delkims. I really regret that.
Yeah, they were great. I mean, it transformed my fishing because I slept through 2 runs at Savay because these weren't loud enough, and I was just using them for a sort of,
just in case you might hear it.
Well, yeah, but also it's just because I'd made them, and people saying, "Why on earth are you still using those herons?"
How many of those did you make?
40 or 50.
Wow.
But these are my originals. These are the actual original ones. They still work perfectly, and I usually try using them about once a year, just for a bit of fun. But they're a pain in the neck, and if it's windy, I don't know how we ever use them because they're terrible in.
You know who'd like those, Tove, don't you?
I could definitely know.
I think the old man would like those.
He'd have them framed, wouldn't he?
He's already got a few of them, but he likes collecting that stuff.
He has got a proper collection of old kit.
Has he?
Yeah, he loves it.
He's got a museum, pretty much. He really does. He collects all that stuff. Yeah, he's got tons of it. Yeah, you need to speak to him.
I was going to say, you'll have to show him them before you go, John. He really likes seeing them.
I will do. But when you said about, experimenting and how you find out whether things work, one of the experiments we carried out, Simon, was not on a lake, but it's the same difference because it shows you how quickly and how significantly fish will respond to the smell of bait when it's introduced into their environment in the right way. And so I've brought these two
We've got a couple of sticks there.
sticks. So I'm showing up to the camera now for those that are listening.
Have you got
in audio.
you've signed those as well, have you?
I've put JB on there.
JB, yeah, lovely.
So we actually used sticks like this. We did this experiment several times. The experiment we used elder pith. You know, the elder pith that you can make floats out of? 'Cause it's very buoyant.
Yeah.
I got a phone call. This is well after 1981, but this is just an example of how we tested flavours. I got a phone call from a friend of mine, Stuart Morgan, who's a
Good barbel angler.
brilliant barbel angler.
Mm.
Yeah, he's a top guy, unbelievable focus, and Stuart and I are very close friends, and he's helped me an awful lot with testing flavours. Anyway, he rang me. He said, "You've got to get down here now and come and look at the way these fish are reacting to the flavour you've just sent me." So I said, "Okay," and the flavour I sent him was Frost and Flood, maple based with a cream vanilla back note. Anyway, we drove to the Bristol Avon, and he said, "We're going to go to this stretch." We went to the stretch and we walked over a bridge, and by the bridge
We got a picture there, Toby.
by the bridge was a chap fishing, and he was fishing right by this snag bush, and so we walked over the bridge, and as the guy was sitting there fishing away, you can see in the picture, there's the bridge.
So we've got an illustration here of the river. We've got a bend there, haven't we? And then a bridge at the end with some snags in front of the bridge.
Yeah. So as Stuart and I walked across the bridge, the little chap, the stick man in the picture by the bridge, we said, "Oh, hello, mate, any good?" And he said, "Oh, no, all the barbel, they're all under the trees." "Oh, right, okay, well, maybe they'll come out later." And Stuart and I walked off 110 yards away and threw some boilies into this swim that you'd never fish, which was very shallow on the inside of a bend, with the flow going from the bend towards the bridge, towards where the guy was fishing. And we threw a load of boilies in, about 5 handfuls. And then we walked away. We had the dog with us, and we threw a stick for the dog, and off we went. So this was the first experiment. An hour later, when we walked back, we said to the guy, "Hello, mate, anything happening?" And he said, "Well, something really weird happened. About 20 minutes after you walked over the bridge, all the fish started swimming out of the snags in front of me and swimming upstream." So those fish had responded straight away to us throwing in that bait. And where these 2 sticks come in that I've brought with me is that the next experiment with a different flavour on a different stretch, Stuart took me to, and he said, "I want you to come and see how quickly they respond to pre-baiting and to this new flavour." So we went to this nondescript stretch, just open bit of river, not many overhanging trees, and he said, "I happen to know the barbel are just in this bed of ranunculus weed, and there's one small tree in the water, but nothing significant, but they're living there at the moment." And he said, "We're going to go about 80, 90 yards upstream. We're going to throw some boilies in." And he said, "At the same time, we're going to throw a couple of sticks like this in the water, and then as they float downstream towards the snags where the barbel are, the weed where the barbel is, watch what happens." So we threw the boilies in. We threw the sticks in at the same time as the boilies, and then as the sticks floated downstream, we kept pace with them. And as the sticks got opposite the tree and the weed, within about 15 to 20 seconds, the barbel became agitated and very slowly came out in the current, put their pectoral fins out. You could see them with their gills going in and out, tasting the water. And you think of the dilution, it must be, it's parts per million.
Millions and millions, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they swam upstream, and we followed them upstream and watched them eat the boilies.
Wow, what a clever experiment that is, though.
Yeah.
So you know that the bait's 100 yards away, but you're using those to see how quickly they actually react to
and what a further endorsement, guys, of the ability of cyprinoids, barbel are a cyprinoid, of carp, of fish, to sense that there are boilies, bait in their environment. Doesn't matter whether it's boilies, that there is angler's bait in their environment. This is something I call the bird table effect. where the human interaction of a wild animal, so, particularly wild on a river, not quite the same on a stock lake, but the same rules apply. You're actually creating on a riverbed, and in particular on a lake bed, when you come to know the topography of that lake and you come to use, a bait that the fish will want to eat, you're creating the same as a bird table effect in your garden. And if you want to bring a certain species of bird onto the bird table, particularly, for example, with greenfinches early in the year, then you put Niger seeds on, they love them. And you can get them to come on the same day onto the bird table. Those birds will come onto that bird table. I think somewhere we've got a picture of a bird, but it doesn't matter if you don't show it, because the spoken word is clear enough to get my point across. And yet there we go. So, these birds are eating these peanuts because human beings have regularly put the peanuts. Squirrels will do the same thing.
They've conditioned them.
We've conditioned them, and we do the same thing with carp. Give them what they want to eat in the same place, and they go and tell their mates. And, it's not rocket science. So, I think we can let nature do a lot of the work for us. And so I called it a bird table effect. In fact, I've written about this on my website in an article about 5 years ago, and it was very interesting to note that a certain well-known angler with the initials TP basically plagiarised exactly this idea and put it in his book. I was quite angry about that.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Saw a good idea there. Actually, just going off a little bit, because I don't know if we're going to get back to this or not. You brought in an interesting baiting device with you.
I've been excited for this bit.
Are we going to talk about this now?
We can talk about it now.
Yeah,
I'm glad you've reminded me.
Yeah, well, yeah, because I want you to show the audience this and to talk about this a little bit.
So to everybody listening who are frustrated about not being able to go abroad to France or fishing where they want to fish because of lockdown, I spent many years travelling to France. In fact, I've been carp fishing in France, particularly wild carp fishing in big reservoirs, big natural lakes and rivers for 35 years. And we used to go over there with a boat on a trailer and just safari. We didn't know where the fish were. It was rumour and hearsay. And straight away we found out, particularly when we started fishing lakes like Chanticoq and the big rivers on the River Seine, that our bait wasn't getting down into the lake bed when we were throwing it in by boat.
The undertow and...
the drift.
Yeah.
Even on a calm day, there's drift on a lake. So for my river fishing in England, because I now with my own fishing, I do quite a bit of fishing on the Thames and some other bigger rivers, and I've got 2 boats, and I can lose myself on the rivers without
Ala
being
Solar,
bothered.
isn't it, the boat's called?
Yeah, my boat's called Ala Solar. In fact, we might even have a picture of it.
We might have to put a picture up, actually. I'm not sure if we did put up. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, there it is.
John, I keep saying you're like you're the best dressed carp angler I've seen anywhere. So we're looking at the boat now, and is that the Thames there?
Yeah, that's the Thames.
Yeah.
And Sorry, John, where'd the name come from?
We might come on to that.
Oh, have I jumped the gun?
No, it's fine. Go on.
No,
yeah.
I'll very quickly tell you. Lovely Keith Selleck. He from Middlesex Angling Centre about 20 years ago. He, very tragically and sadly passed away on that rafting accident on Savay. We're discussing Savay again. What an amazing piece of history that lake is given. And Clive Rigby and Keith Selleck sadly drowned. So he was with a partner in his shop who used to be a butcher, I believe.
Middlesex Angling, wasn't it?
Yeah, I can't remember his partner's name. But anyway, after an appropriate period of time had passed, and people were beginning to contact me as a supplier of special flavours and said, can you get that Ala Solar flavour that Keith Selleck used to sell? And a few people asked me for it, and I said, no, well, sadly, he's passed away. And then one of Keith's close friends who knew the partner, a chap called Mark Warby, he said, I reckon that you can get the flavour if they've, can give you permission to buy it, give it with a letter of introduction. So he said, I'll ring Keith's old partner, because the shop was shut. Anyway, to cut a long story short, and to answer your question, Toby, I did get in contact after a couple of years, or whenever it was, and very, very diplomatically and carefully suggested that I made a contribution to a charity or whatever, to keep Keith's name alive, and could I have the supplier's details of Ala Salar. Not only did I get that, but I got Meatball as well, which has subsequently been discontinued, which is a shame. And it comes from a pretty obscure company, so God bless Keith. He found somebody that produces some pretty unique stuff. And I got the code number. I got a written letter of introduction, and I started to sell Ala Salar. So it's a play on Salar the salmon, because it's a type of salmon flavour.
Yeah.
So if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's brilliant.
And so I've actually got to trademark Ala Salar soon, because another flavour company that's completely unrelated to me or anyone else has been
no relation to fishing or anything.
No relation to fishing, no relation to nothing. But they bought a flavour company that did sell a little bit of fishing bait flavours, and unbeknownst to the directors of this company, they were selling, a flavour called Ala Salar, which the name had been used, I won't say illegally, but it's called passing off. And because I could prove I had the name, I didn't know they were. I think it'd only been going for a year. Anyway, this company bought the company. Yeah. So it merged. And I found out a customer said, "Hey, there's somebody selling Ala Salar." He said, "But it's not, because I've got the flavour and it's nothing the same, because it's very difficult to copy a flavour."
Keith came up with the name, didn't he?
Keith came up with the name.
Where did you know where he got the name from?
Well, I just think it was a play on words from Salar the salmon. So he called it Ala Salar. So the Latin name for salmon is Salar. S-A-L-A-R.
He was a creative guy as well, wasn't he?
He was. So
yeah, sadly missed. Great flavour, John.
Great flavour. So going back to the fishing big waters and being
we're
different,
back.
going on the salmon, using my boat, and I've brought something in. Do you remember the film, with Crocodile Dundee when he's in New York? And they get mugged by a guy
with a knife.
With a knife, and he pulls out the knife.
That's not a knife.
And Crocodile Dundee says, "Call that a knife? That's not a knife." And he takes this massive knife out from behind and said, "That's a knife." And the guy runs off.
This is John's take on
couldn't have been
Crocodile
done
Dundee.
any better.
So this is my take on Crocodile Dundee. Anybody that's used a bait dropper knows that they're about this big, etc., etc.
Yeah, not this one.
That's a bait dropper.
Wow.
So
and you said you could hold a kilo. You can hold a kilo of bait.
So this I had 3 of these custom made. That were all my idea. They're beautifully made.
Yeah.
They've got a big 8-ounce lead on the bottom, and you can put them in from a boat. But I have actually cast one of these out. I only did it once.
What?
With a boat rod. Yeah, I've done it with a boat rod.
How far did you hurl that thing then?
About 10 yards. Yeah. And it deposits a kilo of any bait, including hemp, with the stainless steel mesh is fine. Boom, look at that.
Wow.
You don't go halves, John, do you?
No.
That's brilliant, that. That's
that's a good...
When he came in, that was the thing I was most fascinated about.
I bet you, that caught your attention, Tobe.
Yeah.
So all these things that these things that I do, making the buzzers, I used to build rods, all sorts of different things. It's all part of, when I decided that I would never use anyone else's bait other than that which I've made myself.
You said you haven't used anyone else's bait since, 15, 16 years old? You were 16?
16. I've never used a bait for any species other than maggots and worms and luncheon meat and cheese. If it's a special bait...
That's an achievement, that, isn't it?
Yeah. I've only ever used bait I've made in my mum's kitchen or myself in my own
So you've
workshop.
always had to make your own bait as well, which is a novelty, isn't it?
It's the same when I go big game fishing for tarpon.
These things are beautiful.
Yeah,
so
these are awesome. These are.
Yeah.
This really needs to be seen in close-up, but I bought the tubes, and when I go to Costa Rica fishing for, tarpon, sailfish, that sort of thing, I designed and made these with help with my friend who used to own Leslie's of Luton, Ian Crawley.
Oh yeah.
Ian's very experienced big game angler.
Great fishing tackle shop in the day, wasn't it? As well?
Fantastic.
What happened to them? Blimey.
So I had a mould made, an engineer friend of mine, another engineer. he made a lead mould, so Dan will know that you have to get the lead moulds exactly right. It's a big piece of duraluminum which casts 6 different size leads. I bought a crucible, got some lead off the local church roof. No, I didn't. And I hand paint these real feathers with Indian capes, and I've caught numerous 100-pound plus fish, up over 200-pound GTs, tarpon, all sorts of big fish.
We've got a tarpon on the screen there, John. How big was that one, do you think?
That was about 175 pounds.
Yeah, that's what you got here. Yeah,
it's a proper fish, that is, isn't it?
That is a proper fish.
I don't take them out of the water; they all go back alive. And when you use jigs like this,
all on your own jigs.
All on my own jigs. Not all, and we do use circle hooks sometimes. And baits.
So when you get out to Costa Rica, I bet they're glad to see you, aren't they? You're sort of giving out these as gifts to people and stuff. Well,
of course, most of the Costa Rica lodges, fishing lodges, the customers are from America. And a lot of them are quite brash, and it's expensive to go there. So, you get a lot of wealthy guys, that go hunting and shooting. And of course, you see the way I dress when I go fishing. That a lot of that's from shooting. So, you go there, and they see me down to the boat on the quay in the morning, and with the jigs, and say, "Hey, guy, where'd you get those? Can you make me some of them?" And all the rest of it. I said, "No, you can have one. Here we are." And then they come back in the evening. "Gee, they're great jigs, man."
I bet they'd love them.
Yeah, they'd love them. So,
you got to love the Americans.
Yeah, it's all part of doing. It's like tying your own flies, making your own bait. I mean, that's Ian Crawley on the right there. This was taken a few years ago because I hurriedly put these pictures together. That's about an 80-pound fish. But we don't bring the big ones inside the boat.
No.
I was a bit heavier there, so that picture was taken over 15 years ago.
Right.
To give you an idea of how long I've been going out there. And this was before I lost quite a lot of weight when I had a bit of a cancer scare with I had throat cancer and I had radiotherapy. So I'm a bit fatter there, and I'm a bit thinner now, as you can see looking at me. But
John, sorry, how long do you play something like that for? I mean, they look ridiculous.
Well, if you've got the right gear and you have been a few times and you get used to the way to do it, like everything, you can get them in within half an hour, and that's a 175-pound fish. This is on stand-up gear, not sitting down, letting the boatman back up on the fish. This is switching the engine off and playing it freestyle.
Right.
A lot of guys that go there don't
get
do
the engine.
that.
Yeah, get the engine on and
they get the engine on and make on the fish.
Yeah, yeah. What about weighing them and stuff like that? Then is it just all on length?
You estimate it on length. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't matter what they weigh. It doesn't matter how big they are.
It's the memories, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, pulling something like that out of the water just must be nuts.
The bites.
Oh, go on. What's the bite like?
You'd be surprised.
Oh, don't tell me it's timid.
Yeah.
Well, a little drop back.
When you're fishing with these jigs, tarpon have got very big protrusible mouths. They're like giant sardines, and they feed a lot on shrimp, so they can suck in a huge quantity of sort of water and bait fish, small. Again, if there was krill there, they'd eat krill, but shrimps are where they feed it. We fish an estuary of the Rio Colorado River on the Caribbean side, and so they come along and they sort of see it in the murky water, these bright coloured jigs, which is why they're so bright, or whatever you're using, and they sort of it looks a bit weird, that, doesn't it? They sort of stab at it with their mouths and suck a bit of water in. So very often you get a faint little pull on the rod.
You need to strike.
That's a serious bite.
Is it?
Wow.
Yeah, so it's not like hair rig fishing. You have to strike. Now, that floats my boat, because when I go fishing, I like to strike, which is why I do a lot of float fishing for carp. And we'll come on to that later. But, yeah, so I had to bring these in to show people, because this is very much part of my fishing. Well, I haven't been for a couple of years.
I know, I mean, it just illustrates how organised you are, and if you're going to do something, it's going to be done properly as well. Getting back to Savay, I mean, so you obviously met some interesting guys on there, Roger and Rod and all that sort of stuff. You must have some
Roger,
good memories from back
the
then.
only time I took my wife, well, no, she was my girlfriend then, because I was 27. I said, oh, come on. She said, what's all the fuss about this Savay lake? So I said, well, come on, I'll take you for a walk round. So I took Margot round, and the first person we bumped into on the canal bank was Roger Smith. You couldn't have met a more eccentric member in your first visit. And Margot knows what carp anglers are like, so that's fine. So she's very open-minded, very laid back, easygoing. And he went, you know Roger's voice. He went, hello, how are you getting on? So I said, oh, fine, thanks, Roger, fine. Who's this? Oh, it's Margot. He said, you know, I've done 92 nights. I've done more nights than Red Hopkinson. He used to call Rod Red Hopkinson.
All right.
Nickname. I said, you've done 92 nights. I said, you must have fished every rota and in between, because he was also a bailiff, another privilege, so he could fish both rotas.
Right, yeah.
And that privilege at Savay and the people, I just used Roger Smith as one example. I mean, there were others. I can't remember all of their names now, but you know, there were people there who got divorced because of Savay, who became ill because of the time they spent at Savay, who gave up work. I mean, Bob Baker, who went on to do Richworth Baits, and Albert Romp, great friends of mine, they lived there every rota. I mean, the amount of time these people could do. I mean, I only fished Savay, I think, 10 times, and I had 8 takes.
10 times? Over how many years?
I was only in it 2 years.
2 years?
Yeah.
10 times, right.
10 times, and I maybe 12 times. And I fished that lake and realised it was a pivotal time in my life. I was going to get married, I had a serious relationship. I was offered a fantastic job by a broker. I previously worked for 2 big banks, and then I went to become a broker, which has subsequently been my career for a long time. And I was night fishing midweek and all the rest of it. And I came into the office one day with a bit of a 5 o'clock, an all-night shadow,
Yeah.
and looking a bit dishevelled with my tie to one side, a bit crumpled. And my boss said to me, have you been night fishing? And I said, yeah. So he said, go home, have a shave, put a clean shirt on, and come back, and we'll discuss whether you want to take up fishing for a living or banking and finance.
Was that a proper threat, do you think? Or
Yes.
is it just a bit?
Yes, because I was in a section of finance which dealt with professional people, so I've specialised for 35 years in dealing with doctors and dentists. So I provided through my company called Vector Finance, which I sold last year, and I'm still involved in that business as sort of chairman. And it was a very successful brokerage. I used to work for Schroders Bank, who the division of Schroders was bought by Siemens, the global company Siemens. And I was fortunate enough to be able to do a deal with them about 17 years ago, and I left and set up my own brokerage, and they let me keep my customers. I took 3 staff with me.
That's got to be quite rare, hasn't it?
Yeah, it was very rare.
Because you've been such a loyal employee to them. Sorry, getting back to the boss thing then, I take it you things changed after that, did it?
Well, the people, the intensity of my own involvement in carp fishing, my personality of control, the intensity I was seeing from others, the fanaticism I was seeing from others. This came out with Jack Hilton, for example, you know, who became religious and became a born-again Christian. You know, there are other stories of well-known anglers who gave up carp fishing because it was all too much for them, particularly carp fishing. It seems to do things to people. So when I met all the various characters at Savay, it was at a pivotal time in my life, and I suddenly realised that there was a lot more to life than carp fishing.
What do you think it was with that lake in particular that seems to make people obsessive towards it?
Atmosphere, mystery, the fish, the history, the size,
It's a weird.
Is there another lake that
gets under your skin?
Yeah. Is there another lake like that?
No, I don't think so. Well, other people will have different experience. For example, Frank Warwick, lovely Frank Warwick, my great friend, he will have the same heartfelt familiarity and deep affection for Redmire, and for the other lake he loves. I can't think of the name of it, but there's a couple of. There's only one or two that I'm sure he feels the same way. Where it gets under your skin. And I suppose you think that can't happen to you when. I left Savay. I decided to leave. People said, "You're mad. Give your ticket up." And I said, "No, it's time to move on."
Prioritising work over everything else.
Prioritising work, realising I had a phenomenal opportunity to have a fantastic career, and I was being trained by one of the best in the career, in the industry, who subsequently then sold out for many millions of his own brokerage, and that was great for him. And I kept friendly with him, still friendly with him. He taught me a great deal, but he gave me an opportunity, and I could see that opportunity was there. Plus, I've always fished for other species. I've done an awful lot. I've done match fishing, the whole thing. And it was during match fishing that I met Dickie Carr when I did the photography for his book. And I sat with Dickie and did Success with the Pole, it's called, and I did all the photography for it. I was really into photography then. I did it professionally. I nearly took it up for a career as well. And I said to Dickie one thing, which is where match anglers can teach us a lot. And I said, if you could only pick one thing that's the most important thing about presenting bait for successful match fishing, what would it be? And he said, making your hook bait behave like a free offering. That's all he said.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I went off and trout fished madly and tied all my own flies, and I had a break from carp fishing, but I kept some tickets, like Ashley Pool and one or two other ones.
There is a name, Rod Hutchinson. He's synonymous with Savay and a lot of other places as well. I guess the two of you had some interesting bait conversations while you were on the lake as well. I heard a story about the salmon as well. What was that all about?
Oh my God! Well, that was. Round about that, it all happened in 1981. All around about that same time, Rod was really beginning to develop his own brand and sell bait, and he did the seafood blend, which is actually ground up Purina cat food.
Oh, I use that a lot actually.
That's what
with monster crab. Obviously.
I'll tell you.
Really?
I'm going to mention his name again because I bet he knows. Alan Smith, who suddenly passed away, he knows how good ground up pet food is. Lee Jackson will, and Pete Regan will as well. But Rod's seafood blend was the original monster crab flavour, made up in powder form, put in probably at about 1 to 2% in a bait made up from bulk bags of Purina cat food ground up. That's what it was.
Not too many people probably know that.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
I think he bulked it out with a bit of soya flour and what have you. But that's what it was, because you could buy massive bulk bags of it from the manufacturer Purina. And then if you knew a local farmer, and Rod was in Louth, so he could get that ground. I've never said this before to anybody. This is you're bringing out stories from...
Actually, another interesting story that... or fact that you mentioned with Kevin was super glue with a hair rig as well.
Oh God, yeah.
It was so secretive. You wanted to try and protect it, and using super glue was the way to do that. Because
I was so close to Kevin, and he relied on me to find out all sorts of things for him. He asked me. He said, "Oh, if we lose a rig." And it's got the hair rig tied on. This was in particular at Darenth. He said, do you think we could find a glue where we could, instead of tying the fine line on the hair, it used to be tied on the bend of the hook, that we could glue the fine hair onto the shank or the bend, and then if we lose a rig, or we lose it in a carp, and the carp snaps us off or cuts us off on a bar, the hair the glue will melt after, say, 24 hours, and it would just be a rig left. And I said, I'll see what I can do. This is before the internet, before computers. So I rang round and found some company up in Manchester or something that was specialist glue manufacturers, and they agreed to make a glue. And all around that time, I was beginning to lose my mojo with the fanaticism of it all. So I just said, stuff it, I'm not doing this anymore. And
find your own glue.
Find your own bloody glue, yeah.
God, he had a way, didn't he? Blimey.
Yeah. To say, I mean, look, I'm not in the front line. Well, I don't think I'm in the front line of fishing anymore, certainly with catches. I mean, my actual own personal fishing is a different thing, which I'd love to talk about later. But the level of fanaticism that exists at this pivotal period when, the hair rig came along, boilies came along, specialist baits came along, flavours came along, carbon fibre came along, rod pods, bivvies, throwing sticks, camping by your rods instead of hitting bites has transformed angling. Now, if you're good at camping and you've got lots of time, you're a good carp angler. Yeah. Because you just wait for the fish to hook themselves. Yeah. I'm not being patronising or critical when I say that. It's a statement of fact. And Frank Warwick, again, I'll mention Frank, he specifically mentioned this in his podcast with you. He said it's all different. And I'd love to do a joint podcast with Frank, actually. We'd
like that, wouldn't we?
That'd be a good show.
Good old Frank.
Yeah,
get Frank on.
Frank and I have discussed it.
Have you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
We'll have to clear our schedule.
When are you coming on then?
I would love to ask Frank on a podcast or privately, does he really feel the same about his fishing now as he did before the hair rig in the early days? I wonder what he would say. So we'll put that out to Frank one day.
Maybe listening to this.
Yeah.
Yeah. After Savay, so you decided to for your own well-being to sort of move on to other waters. Where did you fish after that? I know you fished Pit 4 and Harrow as well. I
fished Pit 4, I fished Harrow, I fished the cons. Yeah, I did well at Pit 4. That was amazing. Did a couple of years on Pit 4 and then failed to get my ticket for some inexplicable reason that I'll never know why. In my third year I tried to rejoin Pit 4. My ticket application was rejected by Uxbridge Council. I've never understood quite how that happened because I was very successful.
Well,
there.
Any ideas?
I have got an idea.
Right. Yeah.
I think a couple of people phoned and said that I was breaking the rules.
Right.
Seriously.
Were you?
No.
Right. Wait.
No, I didn't need to. But
Did you have a really good winter catch out there? Was that where you caught the 20s from?
I did. Yeah. Back in '82, I fished it with my great mate Dave Woods. We used salmon flavour with yeasts in a medium milk protein type bait. Really unusual vitamin and mineral profile and great salmon flavour. And we were baiting up midweek. We were keen. So we were going there and baiting up and fishing one night midweek. So we were baiting up when we were fishing and doing one night sometimes every other weekend. And I started fishing it on around my birthday, which is 16th of September in '82. And I had 2020s between September and March, which I was pretty pleased with.
Yeah, that's great going.
And we were so in tune with the baiting time, the feeding times. The feeding times were changing with each month. And people were wondering what I was doing, as you'd expect, because everyone was so keen. There's one particular angler, notorious, I would say, well known, Zen Boyko. He was fishing Savay, and he walked all the way down the canal bank and came and found me one evening, and he just appeared in my swim at Pit 4. And early evening, I was, "Hello Zen, how are you?" He said, "I hear you're catching some fish. I thought I'd come and sit with you and chat to you."
Because the two lakes back onto each other.
The two lakes back onto each other. Can you believe this? Zen sat in my swim for 6 hours waiting for me to catch a fish.
Wasn't he?
Yeah. And telling me stories of the Essex underworld,
He needs to come on the podcast.
He's quite a character, isn't he?
Yeah, I know, yeah. I've heard.
Yeah. And I said, you're only sitting here waiting to see what rig I'm using and trying to see me unhook a fish or trying to pump me for information. I said, I know what you're up to, in a nice, light-hearted way, obviously. And, I said, well, you're going to have to sit here a really long time because the bite time isn't till about 11:30 to 12:30. He said, how do you know that? I said, because I'm just in tune with the lake. I'm in the zone. I mean, there's lots of people listening to this that will get this exactly, that when you do fish one lake regularly, you do get in the zone. Anyway, he said, well, I'll sit here till that time then. And he did. And at 11:45, within the hour period I said...
God, you looked good, John, didn't you?
It ripped off. I mean, I was sort of... Yeah. Anyway, I caught the fish and I unhooked it in the water and threw the rig in the margin.
No.
So, yeah.
God. Did you mind Zen being sat there for... I suppose he had some good conversation, didn't he?
He did. I mean, I didn't mind then, but it really bugs me now. I mean, I've had one guy sat in my swim in France. I was in France fishing on a river near Montreux. In fact, at a place called Vernou, where there's a hot water outlet. And the power station that's on the hot water outlet stopped running about 10 years ago, but I caught a very big fish from the river there. And I'm quite well known in France, recognised because I've done lots of slideshows and been going out there a lot. So I've got some good French mates. And this French guy, he recognised me. Oh, you're John Baker, and he sat in my swim all day. In the end, I said, I need some dodo. I need to go to sleep. Au revoir.
God, how long would he have stayed there for?
I don't know. And apparently he'd driven. I asked him where he lived, and he'd heard I was there from another French guy, and he'd driven 70 miles to come and sit next to me. And
really?
I mean, it was very nice, but oh God, it does wear thin.
That's a bit over fanatical, though, isn't it? Blimey.
Yeah. I mean, look, when you are a bit of a face and you are have a recognisable face and you're in the public eye, and there's plenty of people, like Damien and other people who are well known at Korda. It's a dangerous game, isn't it? Being commercial and earning a living from carp fishing, you have to take you have to give the public what they want in it. That sounds like a big sort of thing to say.
No, but it's true. You're an ambassador, aren't you, for the company?
You've got to be patient. You've got to be fair and reasonable. I mean, I know a couple of quite well-known people in the entertainment business, and I would say who one of them is because he's a good friend, Chris Tarrant. I mean, I was with Chris one day, and a guy jumped out of his car with 2 young children, and we were fishing at a lake, and it was so embarrassing because they went, "Oh, it's the man off the telly," and do you want to phone a friend? Do you want to ask the audience?
You must hear that all the time.
And he hears it all the time, and he was so patient, and it taught me a lot. He did his autograph for the little girl, and he was very patient with their dad, and these people were sort of really embarrassing and idolising him. And when they'd gone, I said, "Chris, you were a star with them. You're very patient." He said, "You've got to." He said, because he only needs to screw
up once with that, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And it all of a sudden Chris Tarrant is
viral.
Yeah, exactly. Chris Tarrant then is a horrible man who wouldn't sign my daughter's autograph. I mean, you just can't. But people need privacy as well, don't they? But it's you've got to play the game. That's
why I've got the boat. That's why I've got my boat. So I can creep away on the boat, and I go away, and that sounds a bit. I'm not reclusive. I mean, Terry Hearn loves his boat fishing. Terry's an avid angler on the Thames. He's fished all different places on the Thames, and Thames is my local river, but there are other rivers. And there's some great places you can take the boat to, some of the Scottish lochs, that sort of thing. But it comes with the territory, and you have to be as patient and as honest and fair and reasonable to everybody as you can. And I think that's why I've spent so much time and effort answering people's questions. Because when I have people email me, for example, which I have done particularly over the last six to 9 months, you know, they're asking me questions about a hobby that they're very passionate about, as equally as I'm passionate about helping them and with baits and tactics. And the tactics come hand in hand. And these people require a lot of reassurance and confidence. And I found that in banking and finance, you know, when people called me in banking and finance, it's just the same as a customer for bait. They're looking for the experience, the reassurance, and there's trust, that important word, trust. You can't put people on a bum steer. It's not fair. So it's best to be honest.
I guess with the YouTube channel, John Baker Baits, if no one's watched it, I mean, you must have expected that anyway, so...
I didn't. No.
Really?
I just did it because my son said, come on, Dad, you know, you're spending hours emailing people and I'm hearing you talking on the phone when I go by your study. Why don't you do some YouTube clips?
So is that sort of stem the phone calls a little bit? I mean, does it all come in messages through YouTube
it's made it
now instead
miles
of,
worse?
Has it? Yeah. I'm not surprised.
It's cooled off a bit now because, you know, lockdown's finished. People are out fishing. You know, we're into the summer season. People have sorted out their bait for the summer. I expect another peak in the autumn. I've got a couple of new products coming out in the autumn, which, you know, I can't keep bringing out new stuff. I've got a fantastic portfolio of products, mainly based around flavours and a few limited base mixes. So, you know, I don't want to go too crazy, but...
what do people most want to know from you then? Is it kind of obvious stuff? What's the best flavour?
Yeah, they mostly want to know about how to make a unique bait using my base mixes and flavour blends. And I brought something out for the first time. No one had ever done it before, and it was my idea. And it was called Pick and Mix. Pick and Mix little bottles. They were only 8ml, tiny little bottles about this big. And I did, I think I did 12 of my best flavours in Pick and Mix. And I didn't realise how popular it would be. Then trying to get the glass files, the 8ml files, when they're used for test samples in medicine around the time when PPE was out there, and oh my God. So I was buying 600 bottles at a time and running out in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then we had to pack them.
Good idea though.
Fill them and pack them.
Yeah.
I've stopped them for the time being. I've suspended them.
So it worked anyway.
Oh, it worked because people could buy a small bottle, mix it, try different blends, and without spending £17 or £18 on a bottle of flavour. So that really helped take it off.
Is that something that you've always advocated, mixing flavours together? Just mess around with them and see for yourself?
Yeah, see for yourself. So when you asked about what's people's main question, it's what exact recipe should I use? I make my own base mix. Which of your flavours can I put in my base mix and how to get the best out of them? To which I then say to them, I can't help you with a recommendation of a flavour unless I know your exact base mix recipe. And amazingly, 90% of all the recipes people send me, and they trust me, they send me their recipe, and I never divulge it to anyone else, and then I advise them in that mix.
I mean, that's just unique, isn't it, in itself?
Yeah. But you'd be amazed, 90% of the emails I get, all the ingredients are the same.
Yeah, same stuff.
Yeah. All the same. Lots of spices, paprika, chili, robin red, fish meal, broker cell yeast, all the same stuff.
Is anyone, I mean, are there any particular ideas that people have come out with that you thought, do you know what, I've never come across that before, that's a great combination, or a...
I haven't seen anything yet.
So what you found for yourself is always been a little bit ahead of it?
That's a good question. Well, let me go back to your question about krill. So I jumped on the idea of krill in 1993. As far as I knew, no one else was using it. So I was about the first person to bring it in bulk, and I was then, to supplement that, I was selling some of it to other bait companies. When it comes to unusual ingredients, I'm really, really keen on this. And I'm particularly keen on the taste of bait and using human food technology, such as the technology used in snack foods, in my own bait. And for the last 20 years, I've used the same recipe. I've virtually not deviated from the same recipe, which is based on milk proteins, yeasts, and I will say, sort of cheese-related products as well. And the reason I say cheese-related products is because the idea came to me when we were fishing in France, and we were having a packet of Crawford's cheddars.
Do you know what? We might have mentioned this before. Those Red Leicester cheddars. Have you eaten those, Tobe?
No.
They're the most Moorish things. You can't eat one packet. Once you've eaten one, you need another packet.
Well, it's
and
like
another
Pringles.
Yeah.
Pringles are the same. Once
I've
you've
had plenty of Pringles.
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, the cheesy one. Yeah.
Walker's salt and vinegar crisps, or Walker's cheese and onion.
You just
crisps.
want to keep eating it, don't you?
Yeah. So.
Sorry. For us, it obviously produces endorphins, doesn't it? It produces a bit of a rush. I mean, it's the same thing happening with fish.
Oh, I think so. Well, yeah, I know so.
Yeah.
Obviously, I can't prove it because I can't ask them. But I can tell you when we were at the peak of going abroad, for example, I've used going to Marpech as an example. People weren't booking, but they'd find out when I was going with Dennis McFetrich, a good pal of mine, very good angler. And we would book Marpech or other lakes, and people would ring up the people, Kevin Maddox or whoever was doing the bookings at these lakes, and say, what dates has John and Dennis on? Because we're not going to book the following week.
Really?
And that is completely true.
Right.
Because it would be, we'd take 8 people with us, and it would be, Dennis and I.
Well, I mean, that's a combination. You've got Dennis McFetrich, he's fantastic innovator, isn't he?
Brilliant.
So,
yeah.
some of the best tackle innovations out there. I love some of his stuff. And then you've got this bait guru as well. That's quite formidable, isn't it?
Well, it's nice of you to say, but it's not a coincidence that Dennis and I didn't hit it off, because Dennis was the Carp equivalent of Stuart Morgan. He helped me develop a lot of the baits and put a direct correlation between the importance of a base mix and a flavour. He's the one that between the two of us we developed base mixes and tested them without flavour. And it was with Dennis that I started to develop these umami foods and these umami baits, and using snack food technology, which was 22 years ago. So you can imagine what I've learnt in 22 years. There are some phenomenal ingredients to be used. Some of them are quite expensive, and I use all of them in the bait I sell. Right. There's nothing I use myself exclusively.
Put that out there.
That I don't put in the base mix. This is base mix powders. I use it all in different proportions at different times of year, and if I'm making customised baits for people.
Do you think companies, bit of a leading question, but do you think companies do hold back a little bit? They could produce the magic ingredient which would cost a lot more, which could change people's fortunes.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Put it this way. The field testers get the good bait.
You believe that?
Do I need to say any more?
No, okay. Should we leave it at that?
Let's leave it at that.
Actually, Marpech, we've seen some monster fish that you've caught from there. Have you got some pictures there, Tobe? We got some, you've had some 78 pounders?
78. Yeah, I had 2 70s in a week.
That's not bad, is it?
Bit lucky.
That's almost like Dovey's session, Tobe, isn't it? That's a private joke. On the podcast that look at, that's my favourite one.
Absolutely.
That fish. Oh my God.
I think that's still alive, and I think it's over 80 now.
Oh, I just love the shape of it.
I gave, before I caught that fish, And I caught both the big ones, that one and one called Rambo, in the same week.
Rambo.
Yeah.
Mind you, he looks like he's been through the walls a little bit as well, doesn't he?
Yeah, that fish was rescued having been snagged up. It was snagged up in some fishing line. It got wrapped up in some fishing line.
Right.
And it got badly damaged.
Did it grow a lot after that?
Yeah. It's as tough as old boots, that fish.
You notice those fish that get tethered up, they can sometimes, with Damo with the scar, you know, the story with the scar, you know, it was like tethered up and then it just went on a massive growth rate, didn't it? Do you think, did that one do similar or not quite to that extent?
I don't think to that extent, but I think you get these freewheeling fish, you get these genetic freaks. I mean, you know.
That is a mental, for people that are listening, I mean, it's quite a stocky, muscular, very, very deep fish, not a lot of length to it.
It's got a massive head.
Massive head.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
But I'd previously photographed that fish for 2 other people where they were blanking at Marpesh. This is completely true. They came into my swim halfway through the week or 3/4 of the way through the week on a Thursday and said, John, I'm fed up with taking pictures of your fish all week. I mean, it was that embarrassing. You know, I can't catch any fish. My bait's crap. Can you help me? And I said, well, here's 3 hook baits, 1 for each rod. And I did this twice. Twice I gave people who were fishing next to me 3 hook baits, and twice they caught that fish.
No way.
Wow.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And how do you think I reacted?
Well, if I could ever go to Marpesh, which is quite difficult nowadays, isn't it?
Very.
Yeah. I have to borrow some bait off you, John. Yeah.
You're more than welcome.
270s in a session, though. That's. I mean, have you got aspirations to, you know, try and catch 80, 90 pound carp?
No.
Which one's this?
No, this is Rambo. This is the other one. The actual way I caught these fish was pretty much how I said earlier about, you know, the random baiting patterns. But I took it to the nth degree, and I've used this tactic in England as well. I did this tactic at a lake up in Shropshire, Acton Burnell, which I left quite a few years ago. And that's where you cast out minimally. This was the time when Acton Burnell was being hammered with spod fishing, and it was really coming into vogue then, and method mix and all sorts of things. I caught 340s one weekend from there, using this random baiting pattern. But at Marpesh, because it's hammered, really hammered with a changeover every Saturday, you know, the fish had seen everything all before. I mean, one year, some guys brought in big refrigerated boxes something like 20 gallons of maggots to try that. And the following week, no one could get a bite.
That's
20 gallons.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. You know, so the people who run and operate these lakes, the owners of the lakes, they've got to be very careful what's being thrown in. As a lake owner myself, I'm very conscious of it. But at Marpesh, the last few sessions, you know, this was the lake where I did a visit once just for the hell of it, where I just took 3 rods, but only ended up fishing 2. No marker float, and no measuring sticks. In fact, I don't own a set of measuring sticks. If I'm that paranoid about measuring out my lines, I'll just walk up the bank somewhere and mark it off, or I'll fish the dong and put a bit of elastic on the line, and then do it by turning the reel handle the number of turns.
Oh,
on
you
the
do
reel
that?
handle.
Yeah,
that's okay. It's fine.
Yeah.
So at Marpesh, it was 90 degrees every day, terrible conditions. No one was catching hardly anything. And the fish were feeding at a weird time. They were feeding at about 8 to 10 in the morning. So I could get a nice night's sleep, because I'm not mad for night fishing these days. I like to get a decent night's sleep if I can. Otherwise, you feel wrecked by the end of the week. You don't feel you've had a holiday, and then you've got a long drive home. So try to get a half-decent night's sleep. And I was only fishing 1 or 2 rods at night. But one night, I didn't fish any, didn't cast out at all. This might sound a bit bizarre, but I often don't do that on the first day. Don't put any lines in the water at all until the following morning. And then I've got all 3 rods propped up against a tree, balanced up, all ready to go. And if I wake up in the morning and I see a fish roll, I'll cast to it. And I won't cast out the other rods unless I see a fish roll. And this is how I caught those 2 fish. I caught both of them casting to rolling fish within 15 minutes of the bait going in.
Did you?
15 minutes of casting, each one. Yeah. And
there was a guy fishing on Savay, fantastic margin angler. And he said the same thing, watching fish in the margins. If the fish were around and you had another bite within like 20 minutes or so, it's like, that ain't getting picked up, or you need to do something with that. It's either gonna go, or you need to do something. It's funny, isn't it, how you can it could just be presented in a way that we wouldn't necessarily even recognise, but for the fish there is something that's not right. So do you think the same thing was happening with you then? Really, they're not used to seeing a rig there. All of a sudden, a bait's there, and it's just boom, they're straight on it.
Yeah, this is the sort of recasting thing every 2 or 3 hours or 4 hours, depending. Because other people don't do it, and you have to really think outside the box. And because I don't fish very much these days for carp, when I do go, I'm full on. I mean, it is machine computer brain, how can I make the most out of this session, even if it's one overnighter, because over the years I haven't got a great list of monsters to my name, UK caught monsters, because I haven't followed that pathway. My success rate on carp fishing in the UK doesn't come close to Frank Warwick, doesn't come close to whoever else you can think of, well-known anglers, because I don't want to follow that pathway. I'm quite happy with quality over quantity and the company. I'm very keen on who I go with, and I'm quite happy to sit and watch them fish, which is, I do that. I've got some great friends that I go fishing with. I'm very happy to just have a bottle of wine and sit and enjoy it, not get plastered, just
enjoy it.
Just enjoy the evening, and that's where my own fishing comes in, because I do a lot of float fishing. So I'll bait up a couple of swims for the morning, sleep without fishing, and then at dawn I'm up when they're asleep, casting over a float in the margins over my baited area.
That's such an effective method, though.
And I've done that
Yeah.
since I was in my 20s. I often fished my Cambridgeshire syndicate lakes, for example, where I would do exactly that, even when I was young and enthusiastic and fanatical in my 20s, early 20s.
You think the float method would always outscore a conventional carp fishing method?
Not now.
When we were fishing the other day, and Adrian Smith was fishing, and he found some fish along one of the banks, and he was doing that. I think he had a bite straight away on conventional methods, and then he was fishing with the the lift method, sort of trout method, and he didn't get a bite. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because it looks so much more refined, and you think, crikey, yeah.
Well, you have to strike. You're close to the fish. You see the bubbles coming up. It's a bit like fishing with Mr. Crabtree,
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it. If you're an experienced angler, and there's many thousands of experienced anglers out there who know that this or that rig in these or that conditions will catch a fish, they're happy with their bait, and they're happy with their overall tactics, and they love their carp fishing. What I really don't get is why those guys who are good anglers and they catch regularly, why they want to keep doing the same thing month in, month out. Year in, year out. Why not go roach fishing? Why not go perch fishing? I mean, I love my perch fishing. Go trout fishing. Do something different. I get it that people are fanatical about carp fishing. I've been there, and I suppose I am still fanatical because I'm still involved in it. But the fanaticism needn't be continually catching fish on methods that are so deadly and effective. I mean, the modern trap method, I call it a trap, of anti-eject rigs, hair rig fishing, it's so effective. It's so good. Float fishing is much more difficult. So the point I'm trying to make is, I think there has to be more of a reason for me to go, rather than just saying, there's a 50 in that lake I want to catch, and I'm going to sit there until I catch it.
Mm.
If somebody has got the patience to do that, fair play.
Mm.
I've never had that patience.
Mm.
I'd rather go roach fishing, to get more bites.
John, just a quick one. I'm aware that we haven't got loads of time left, but I'm going to steal some knowledge from you, if that's all right.
Well, I hope I can help.
I've not long been match angling. It's my new, as I keep saying, it's my new love. I've got a question. How can, obviously you being kind of bait guru, is there a way in which at a beginner level through match angling I can separate myself through a different approach with bait?
Oh,
that's a nice question. Well, the predominance, I'm not an expert in modern day match angling, or particularly in latter day match angling. I did do a bit of match fishing, but minimally. Are you talking about general match fishing for general coarse fish?
Yeah. Kind of. I know that's quite broad, but yeah, I'm trying to take it all in at the moment.
Okay. I help quite a few people that fish, for example, for roach, tench and bream. Mm. And if you were going to put, with match angling, you've only got a small window, obviously, to bag up and hopefully get something to weigh in. So I would say that there are some things that you could use from carp fishing additives, from that discipline, as additives in ground bait, and even potentially the Rolls Royce of bait, which would be paste.
All right, okay. See, this is all new to me.
So whilst a lot of people that match fish, a lot of the stuff that's going around, the development work has been done on carp match fishing, fishing for fish up to sort of just under 10 pounds, feeder fishing and all, self-hooking fish. If you're talking about float fishing and float fishing for silverfish, or, generally doing that kind of work, so general match fishing, there are certainly some additives that you could put in. And one of them that I recommend, it was one I helped Rod Hutchinson with, actually, his bream attractor. That's got a combination of maple in it.
Wow, okay.
Bream love maple. Again, maple's cropped up, but they do like it. And they like molasses. So if you were to water down your ground bait additive with a little bit of maple flavour and molasses, you've got a natural product in molasses. You could even put a little touch of honey with it as well.
I'm going to be stealing that Manuka honey off there.
which in particular would be very different than what other people are using. Again, you need to be different, particularly if it's a dedicated match venue. So I would use some additives. Roach also love creamy flavours. So if you were to use, the old original dairy cream flavour, that'd be a good one. A banana, caramel banana, or blend something together. And again, mix it with the lake water and put it as a ground bait additive with a touch of honey, touch of molasses. Molasses is a good one. You could even go further, depending on what you're fishing for. If it depends on the species, but they all like the confectionery flavours, those sweetened confectionery flavours. We know that the pellet regime for match angling is mega, and the major development work has been done around that. So there's every additive you can think of for pellets, but if you were going to use pellets, little baby pellets, hang the expense, I would use koi pellets.
Oh, okay.
They're the best pellets you can use for any fishing. The technology that goes into the manufacture of koi pellets is phenomenal. Streaks ahead of any other form, because these fish are so expensive. So the technology that goes into them is great. I use a lot of koi pellet technology in my own bait.
What's inside a koi pellet that's different to a normal pellet then?
Multiple yeasts, fresh organic kelps. They use a lot of fresh wheat germ. I mean, obviously the pellets are dried, so they've got a reduced moisture content. Wheat germ's quite important in winter match fishing. Even you think, well, does it matter in a day? When I'm only there for a day, how do they know the wheat's good for them? They know the wheat germ is good for them.
How big a pellet would you suggest Toby use size-wise?
Well,
I'm writing my shopping list as we
Yeah,
speak.
yeah, write it down. Yeah.
you know, if you are fishing for general fish, so this would include all the general fish that you're fishing for in a match, in a mixed lake fishing, or even in a river, but probably I would say the smallest you can get away with. But you can make your own little baby soft pellets, which what match angler does that, but you can make that by hand with no equipment, because you only want a few hook baits, so you can actually make them up. I mean, contact me afterwards and I'll tell you how.
I was just about to say, will you show me how to do that?
Yeah.
And what about scalding these pellets and actually turning these koi pellets into a paste?
You can do that. Yeah, absolutely, you can do that. Even better, you can, but for the amount you're going to use in match fishing, you can go, I mean, you know, I'll have to come on and do another podcast and perhaps even do a bit of a demo, but if you start using grinding machines, little coffee grinders, which you can buy for 15 quid, if you bought a NutriBullet, I think they're like an in-trend thing for making smoothies.
Yeah.
You can grind up seeds and it all releases all their natural oils. They love all that. And you can grind up pellets. So you can grind up koi pellets, make a paste, and just mix it with eggs, and you don't need any other ingredient, just that.
And what do you do with that? Is that when you let them dry?
You can just boil them for tiny little pellets.
Okay.
You can roll them up, or you can roll them out into long sausages and chop them up like chop-ups.
Oh, right, yeah, I'm with you.
And just scald them for 15 seconds, and you've got soft hookable pellets made with fresh ingredients.
And the
Wow.
liquid molasses. I mean, how much of that would you put in this ground bait?
Well, if you've got, say, an empty cleaned out water bottle, like a 1 litre water bottle, and you fill it with either filtered water or lake water, what you could do is pre-measure it before you go to the lake, so you haven't got to cart loads of stuff with you. You could leave a bottle in the car if you like, or how much does 1 litre of water make up? You could even make it at home, so you'd have plenty of ground bait if you had a whole litre bottle of water. That's quite a lot of water. So you would need to mix something in the region. I would recommend, say, 40 to 50 mil of molasses. So that would be 4 big tablespoons.
You can use quite a lot of that, can't you?
Yeah.
You can't. It's difficult to really.
Yeah, and it's got quite a nice burnt smell. It's got
Yeah.
quite a nice, good smell. And then of the maple or the cream flavour to 1 litre, just 5 mil.
Wow.
For a ground bait additive.
Yeah.
Just a teaspoon. It's
There you
fine.
go.
I feel like I've been spoilt with my own little tutorial then.
Yeah, I
That was
know.
incredible. Thank you.
Just I hope that anyone that you're fishing against, Tobe, is not listening to this as well.
But nobody needs to
there's-
watch that bit.
There's
I'm
lots
gonna
of
cut
other
it out.
things you can do. There's lots with spices, in particular ground bait additives with spices. There's certain spices that appeal. There's quite a few things you can do. So
Good question.
No, brilliant. Thank you,
It's
John.
a great
Cheers.
question.
Yeah, just to wrap things up. So where are you now, John? I mean, it's you've been for a bit the last 10 years, and we're at this point now. Where do you see the business going, and where do you see your own fishing going?
Well, my plan was, Simon, thanks for the question. My plan was, when I sold my finance business last year to a lovely chap, Matt Shelper, he's lovely young family, and we get on really well. And so I'm still helping him. But to sell a business in lockdown was very challenging. So that's come with a whole different set of problems, because you need to support somebody. Just because they bought your business, you don't walk away from it. So, and because I know all the customers still, they want to see that I'm still around. In the context, which is, although I've run my proper career business in banking and finance, as a real career, which is what's, pay for my mortgage and take me on some nice holidays. The fishing business has had an unexpected resurgence, again, as direct result of people spending the time to stop and think about their own fishing, like the question Toby's just asked, and some of the questions that you and I have discussed, since we've been chatting over the last podcasts we've done and our relationship over the last few months. So I think what I've done is I've achieved something which is lovely, which is I've helped people, and I've made them think. And if I've just made a small percentage of the carp fishing population think a bit more about their own fishing, which I know I have, then that will do for me. But of course, being a perfectionist and being somebody who can't help themselves, I am a bit of a workaholic still. The question I'm asking myself now, which hopefully answers your question a little bit, is I am now beginning to think about how do I get my mojo back a bit more on my own UK fishing, because I've not gone off fishing, but I think Bill Cottam, the ex-director of NutriBaits, he said in print recently in Carpology magazine that, an awful lot of people who are in the trade do lose their mojo on fishing, and it's difficult to get it back. I would say I'm a little bit that way at the moment, in truth. So I go off and do different things, but you can't always do that as an escape. And I know that deep down, the fire is still there to just do a few things I want to do. There's still plenty I want to do in fishing. So I have to make a decision about whether I spend the bulk of my time fishing, my spare time fishing, because I've now got the time, because I am retired. I don't do a full-time job anymore. But what's happened with the bait business is it's gone pretty crazy. Whilst I'm the only bait manufacturer in Europe that is active, out there, busy, I don't sell boilies.
You don't? No.
But people quite like it. And people that used to make their own bait and have got all the equipment in the loft, I've had quite a lot of emails, scores of emails, where people have said, I don't know what the hell I've been doing over the last few years. I've now got all my old equipment out, bought some new stuff, and I'm making my own fresh bait again, and it's transformed my fishing. So there is a small percentage of people out there, and it is a small percentage, because we live in a fast, super fast world, don't we, where everyone wants a quick fix. Everyone wants the fast route to success.
Have you ever wondered what a John Baker boilie would be, how well that would sell?
I've made hundreds and thousands of them, tons of them.
I mean, Dave Llewellyn was selling your bait, wasn't he?
John Llewellyn was rolling some of my bait for me.
John Llewellyn.
He was very near in the same village. He actually moved into my old bait unit and predominantly was selling in France. He's sort of pretty much retired from carp bait now. But, we had a great relationship and, again, it worked because of the French connection as well. John spoke fluent French and was a great communicator, still is. I've kind of gone to every pathway. I've made bait for Yateley Angling, the successful ASAP and ASP bait. We sold, a lot of that. And making and rolling bait, you either have to be set up for it properly, really properly, like mainline or, some of the bait works down on the Cotswold Water Park, or you've got to be set up for it properly because it's almost a different discipline. And when I was selling lots of boilies, when I had a big factory unit and 4 people working for me, supplying 100 plus shops, the only reason I stopped that was because I got ill. So, we won't talk about that now because I'm better. But now I know that if I go back, which I can do at the drop of a hat, I can go and rent a local unit, employ someone, and I will be snowed under. But I would have been snowed under before because everybody wants me to make boilies for them. So my dilemma is, do I partner up with somebody who I trust? A difficult question. If you do that, you have to really tell them all your recipes. That means they're gone forever. And I've already had 4 or 5 people who have had that knowledge from many years ago and have basically implied that it's theirs. I'm not bothered about that anymore. I was at one point. I went through a bad spell a few years ago with a pal of mine that wanted to do some bait and suddenly decided to do his own thing, and used a lot of my ideas I'd helped him with. But that's life. That's life, and that's fine. It's all gone. It's in the past. So I am at a crossroads. To answer your question, it's right in the last few weeks, and one of the reasons for that is that my son William has got a job.
He's got a real job.
He's got a real job. It's his first day today, and guess where he's gone into? Banking and finance.
Following in the old footsteps.
And that was that was not engineered by me.
Right.
That was his own choice. The recruiter had well, excuse me, where I live in Berkshire, in Reading, in the Thames Valley. There's quite a lot of financial service banks. There's Investec, BNP Paribas, where William's got a job, Aldermore Bank. Yeah, there's a number of big banks. Siemens Financial Services, where I used to work. So the Thames Valley and Reading area is awash with bank and finance peoples or software companies. So I'm not too sure where to take it, but my son-in-law, Richard Maud, he's very keen. He's a qualified aquaculturist, specialist in koi feeds. He's keen to perhaps become involved in some way. So I think something will evolve out of this decision for me to try and have a life and stop being quite so hands-on running the bait, because I can't help myself. If somebody asks me a question and emails me, I have to give them all of myself pretty much and help them, because otherwise I feel I'm not being honest with the customer. And a lot of my customers I've known for a long time, and there's a reputation to protect as well. So
he sounds ideal then, doesn't it? Keep it within the family. And
I think so.
Is that a full-time job then?
It would be, well, if I'm in the background and we get a bit of help from the rest of the family, no, it's not a full-time job. But I'm not particularly keen now. I'm in my mid-60s, having been there and done it with bait over the years. I'm not particularly keen to employ a team of people again. I would rather inherit a team of people or bolt on to a team of people. I've tried it a couple of times and it hasn't worked, so I feel I've been burned. And when you are sharing information that's taken a lifetime to collect, particularly something that you're passionate about, you do have to be very careful when you make those choices. I mean, when I made the choice to sell the finance business, for example, I was really lucky to find Matt, who we just hit it off. I mean, we're almost like a father and son. And I can't expect my own son to come into a business. I mean, he's not really a fisherman. So I think something will evolve, because it always does. I always think that there's a good thing round the corner. You have to think positively and you have to think that way. So I don't know.
I mean, it would be a real shame, wouldn't it, just to turn your back on that? And I get the impression it's not really about a business. It's more of a labour of love for you, isn't it? It's something that you've just always done.
Well, I bumped into Damon on the way here, and when I first knew him, he was managing a fishing tackle a shop in Snags of Colchester, I think it was.
Snags, yep.
And it's a long time since I've spoken to him, and his exact words to me were, "Well, it's a labour of love for you, John, isn't it?" But
that really sounds like something he'd say, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it is a hobby-related business. It's never represented a significant part of my income. It's taken off and it's very busy now. So I do have to make a decision, because there is a robust and successful brand there, which would be a shame for it not to be developed. It's just how and who develops it. And I don't know the answer to your question.
It will work itself out.
I think it will work itself out.
We get a few people tune into this podcast, so you never know on that. But like you say, you don't want to be giving away too much there. It's having some sort of control over it and trusting the people that potentially would be doing that, which I can see would not be that easy. But it will sort itself out.
I think it will, and it's always refreshingly pleasant to find that there are people out there with the same level of passion. Yeah. That I've got, it's the same here at Korda. I've just been down to the float department. You know, they're lovely people down there. They're really proud of what they're making, and so it's good to see all that when you come to a manufacturing company, and you know, particularly in fishing.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah. Good stuff, John. Thanks very much for coming on the show. Really enjoyed it. I
thank
mean,
you,
like you
John.
say,
It
we've
was
built
brilliant,
up.
mate.
Yeah, we've built up a bit of a relationship over the last couple of months, haven't we? And it's been great getting to know you before this as well. And
I'll say it now, I'm going to keep punishing you in the following months for more bait advice.
Yeah, you're more than welcome. You know, I enjoy doing it. I can't help myself. I get up early in the morning and I do reply to emails, and sometimes people say to me, "Wow, I can't believe you've answered me so early in the morning." But when you get a bit older, you go to bed early and you get up early.
Yeah.
You get lots done. So.
yeah, that's it. Yeah. Well, thanks very much. And if you need to speak to Frank, don't you, and see if we get the A team on the podcast. That'd be good, wouldn't it?
It would be wonderful, because there is a chemistry between Frank and myself which is difficult to put into words. But
It's yin and yang, you two, isn't it? It's like
he's great, Frank. You know?
he is great. He is great, and I bet he's itching to get back in here as well. He loves this stuff.
And you know what? I'm really glad we have finished on that name, because I recently read his book, which he kindly illustrated and sent me a copy of. And it's a proper carp book.
You've got it over there, yeah.
Really interesting book, and fair play to him. You can see the effort he put into it, and I've got a sneaking little suspicion he might be doing another one.
Oh, right. He's a classy angler.
In fact,
that's for sure.
I may even do my own book one day.
There we go. You put it out there. John, thanks very much for coming on.
Thanks for asking. Cheers.
Thanks.
Cheers, guys.
The Thinking Tackle Podcast.